Welcome in to Check the Mic. It is time for our Week 3 preview. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. Welcome in, everybody.
Welcome into you, Steve.
Thank you. Sam, we've got 16 games to preview, as always, here. Can't wait for bye weeks.
When do they start?
I don't know. Not soon enough. I'm just kidding.
It's usually week 4, right?
No, I think it's later now.
After week 4?
Yeah, 18-game schedule. Then they do this thing where they don't have any buys for like week 9 and 10 and something. So it's a mishmash of stuff. But no, we're excited. We're getting ready for week 3. We got Thursday night football tonight with the Jets and Patriots. So we got a full show. We ready to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Gonna be fun.
I got Harry's picks in this
Perfect.
week as well. We got them ahead of time. Do you want to give a little update on the picks?
Well, Harry is leading
in sleeper.
Us 3 in the sleeper league.
Yeah,
right.
He has 17 wins.
Yep.
It's all part of the sleeper app. Did we respond to the person that emailed to us, or was he mocking us when he said thanks?
Who? What now? What?
Somebody emailed asking. We'll get it. We got to get them hooked up with sleeper. So you guys can play along through Discord.
Yep.
Link to sleeper. Harry's got 17 wins through 2 weeks.
Yep.
I have 16 wins through 2 weeks. And how many do you have?
14.
14.
My week 1 was not good. The leader of that, you know how many the leader has?
How many?
23.
23 through 2 weeks.
Correct. The leader of the Pick'em, or of the Pick'em league in the.
So what's he? 23 and 9.
Yeah, whatever that is.
Yeah, that's good.
He's 3 games clear of anybody else.
It's pretty legit.
Right. So go sign up to the Discord. You can find the link to that in the description of this show. The Discord, the welcome thing there will give you links to the sleeper, where we're doing a Pick'em League and a Survivor Pool. The Survivor Pool, 41% of people are still alive after 2 weeks.
You see our friends at Circa are like giving
I saw that.
what is it, like a care package for those who are already eliminated. Like you can just get out there for free.
Yeah,
on a weeknight if you've already been eliminated.
Comp and rooms if you've been eliminated already.
One last thing is next week, starting with our friends at Prize Picks, and all sorts of fun coming out of that. There'll be other stuff in the Discord, partnering with Prize Picks, and you guys can be a part of all the action. It's going to be a lot of fun. So get ready for that next week.
Yep, good time to sign up at the Discord.
All right, let's start with Thursday night football. New England Patriots at the New York Jets. Couple teams that are 1-1, and the Jets are favored by 6.5 at home here. Amazon Prime game tonight.
Yeah, and that's an aggressive line, right? The Jets have been okay, but they haven't exactly set the world on fire. Meanwhile, the Patriots have looked a lot better than people were expecting them to.
Yeah, I would say, it's interesting, right? Because when lines are set, the Jets beat the Titans by 7 last week.
Right.
But it's a game that was 17-17 into the fourth quarter.
Because of Will Levis, essentially.
And the Jets, the Titans had an opportunity to come back and tie it at the end, right? It was a pretty close game, but it ends up at 7. This line doesn't feel crazy to me if you told me before the season.
Sure.
But now the Jets have kind of got smoked by the Niners. They pull off the 7-point win against the Titans. And New England has been, I think, one of the 1-1 Patriots have been one of the more impressive teams relative to my expectations. I had really low expectations. They've beaten Cincinnati, and they took Seattle to overtime. And, pass interference, a couple plays here and there, and maybe they're winning against Seattle. So I've been impressed with New England to this point.
Yeah, meanwhile, the Jets' defense hasn't looked as good as it has looked in the last couple of years, particularly up front. That defensive front has not been as strong. It's not as deep. It's missing some players. You would assume the Patriots are going to want to run the ball, keep that kind of offense going. Should actually have some success against the Jets. And then, the Jets' offense it's not been amazing, and New England's defense is still pretty good. Like Keon White in particular against that interior line, I think will be really fun to watch. Christian Gonzalez against Garrett Wilson will be fun to watch. Like there's a lot of good matchups that don't expose New England's defense, and actually it's strength on strength in a couple of areas. I just feel like this is a closer game than that.
I've loved the Christian Gonzalez Garrett Wilson matchup. I assume they've moved Christian Gonzalez around a little bit these last few weeks. Was matched up against DK Metcalf quite a bit last week. I expect that he would track Garrett Wilson if they continue with that strategy. Wilson's had an interesting couple games where he was targeted a ton early on against the Niners, and it's been a little bit more hit or miss to that point. And you mentioned the Jets offense. Like, I think overall Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball well. It's just they're not doing a whole lot of – they're kind of doing the opposite of what the NFL is doing, which is those – instead of those long sustained drives, it's like a couple big-time throws here and there and, getting into the end zone but having a bunch of, 3-and-outs, 4-and-outs and some of those just not a consistent moving of the ball by the Jets offense so far. The matchup you mentioned, though, Ramondre Stevenson running the ball against this Jets defense. Stevenson's running like crazy. Most of his yards coming after, literally almost all of his yards coming after contact per PFF, and the Jets with the fifth worst run defense grade. And depleted up front. You lose a hammer on the outside like Jermaine Johnson at edge. That's more snaps for a guy like Will McDonald, who should be more of a designated pass rusher. There are places to exploit, shorten the game, run the ball against this Jets defense.
Yeah,
and that's part of this, like, the line, right? I think New England at least keeps this close the way they have those first two games.
Ramondre Stevenson has 170 yards after contact and has 13 broken tackles through the first 2 weeks. Those
170 out of what?
170 out of 201.
So I saw it, and then NGS stats have him with like more than 201 after contact. Sometimes those the numbers are tracked differently, obviously. But we're talking about New England's O-line. It's not like they're dominant up front and moving people, but they're bulking up, right? Throwing the extra O-lineman in there and just creating that old school downhill attack.
And they're trying to keep it on the ground, which is, minimizing the exposure in pass protection to those questionable offensive tackle spots.
So my concern would be, I still think the Jets have the pieces for a very good pass defense. Jacoby Brissett not throwing the ball down the field, targeting Hunter Henry like crazy on Sunday. I don't know if the New England's going to get anything out of the pass game. And Jets pass rush could give New England's O-line some issues. So if we're talking how do the Jets cover, if New England doesn't, right now it's like they're getting the 3rd and 5s, they're converting the 3rd and 4s. You just lose some of those third down conversions because of the Jets pass rush, and all of a sudden I could see how it could be a 20-6 game or something.
Yeah,
like
so that's the problem, right? Is that it becomes quite an easy cover if the Jets just get a couple of big plays on offense. Like that's essentially what it comes down to. If they're able to find a couple of big plays and exploit New England's defense, you don't see a way that the Patriots offense is really going to keep pace. Like that's probably a fairly steady high teens, low 20s type of output at maximum. So if the Jets actually do find some offense, then that's it gets easy to overcome what is essentially a one-score line pretty quickly.
Juwan Bentley injured on Sunday, the starting linebacker for the New England Patriots. It was rumored to be season-ending. I don't know if it ends up. There's I think Gerard Mayo left the door open for him to come back later in the season. Either way, he's certainly out for this game, and that's a big loss for New England. All right, man, where are you going in this one? It is the Jets favored by 6.5.
Yeah, I'm leaning New England keeping it closer than that. I just feel like this is a tighter game than a fairly comfortable Jets win.
I'm with you. I'll take New England to keep it close. I think the Jets do win it. I'll take New England to cover the 6.5, and we have Harry's picks available here. He is also taking New England to cover. I think he's 2-0 picking New England against the spread these last couple of weeks here. So
I haven't checked.
Harry.
Where does he sit in the sleeper league? How many people are actually beating?
He told me he's tied for 12th or something like that. I think like he's fairly close to the top.
It's not encouraging how many of us are losing to the child.
We'll get there. We'll talk about the Commanders, Bengals. We're going to be at that game, him and I. And I'm surprised by his pick. When we get to it. Yeah, I'm surprised. All right, let's get to some of the biggest games of the week. Philadelphia Eagles at the New Orleans Saints. You're undefeated 2-0 New Orleans Saints. They're favored by 2.5 against Philly.
Yeah, which is fair.
Is that correct?
Yeah. They should be favored, right?
Because the line...
Oh, you're asking is the line correct?
Am I reading that right? That it was...
Hold, please.
2.5. Yeah, New Orleans by 2.5. It wouldn't be wrong. I wouldn't be wrong on our...
No, why would it be wrong?
On our lower third.
Right.
On our graphic here.
That feels correct, right?
Yeah. I do wonder how much the Eagles' collapse affects that. You're literally talking about a Saquon Barkley drop or a different play call or going for it versus kicking a field goal, making the Eagles 2-0. I wonder if that changes any perception. But look, there's been no more impressive team in the NFL than the Saints.
Yeah, I
through
mean,
2
based
weeks.
off 2 weeks, this line is wildly favoring Philadelphia. I understand, as you said, they're a play or two away from being 2-0, but in terms of performance, the Saints have been dramatically better than the Eagles through 2 games so far this year. So, you know, this only being 2.5 in their favor is about what the home field advantage is these days. Like, it's not the 3 points it used to be. It's probably now 2.5. So Vegas is essentially saying neutral field, this is a coin flip, which is, I think, like very flattering to Philadelphia based off 2 weeks of evidence. I'm curious how Vic Fangio's defense matches up against what is the hottest offense in the NFL right now. Clint Kubiak, everything they're doing there, pushing the boundaries in terms of all these like offensive cheat code numbers, you know, play action, motion. They're like, it's almost like he's seeing how far can I push this and it still work. And I'm sure that isn't the case. I'm sure this is, you know, partly game flow, all this kind of thing. But right now you have an offense that is absolutely cooking. Derek Carr playing phenomenal football, the best of his career, going up against Fangio's defense, which, you know, is probably still, it's either as good a defensive scheme or, you know, the sort of second best one in the NFL right now, a coach that is smart, understands what he's doing, but has just come off a collapse where his defense gave Atlanta that easy march down the field to win. What does he dial up to try and stop everything that the Saints are doing?
And then from a personnel standpoint, Philly's defense, have we overrated their personnel? I've got some concerns, right? If I told you after through 2 weeks, Jalen Carter would have a 38 PFF grade, 33.6 against the run. I went back and rewatched a lot of Jalen Carter just to see what is going on with him. I mean, he still has his splash plays in there, right? I mean, that's one of those things. Even when a guy has a bad grade or a bad production grade, you could still find good plays. But the number of times that Jalen Carter is turned around at the line of scrimmage, moved off the ball, or simply a non-factor on plays in between the tackles is kind of alarming. He wasn't playing like that last year. The other one's Jordan Davis.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent a lot of time on this show pre-draft 2022 discussing Jordan Davis as the modern nose tackle who is he worth the first-round pick as a run-stuffing 340-pounder who can move, and all this talk about too high defenses and how teams are inviting the run more, and you need a guy like Jordan Davis to stop the run with fewer bodies around him. And Davis isn't doing it. He has not been, outside of a couple games, he has not been dominant, you know, as he heads into year 3 here. So, and then the other one's Bryce Huff. And I know you had some numbers that you pulled out. You know, Bryce Huff is in this year to replace Hassan Reddick. Huff was a guy that was one of the best down-for-down pass rushers in the NFL over the last couple of years. He's been nothing like that. So, to me, this Eagles defensive front, which should be very good on paper, has completely underwhelmed. I wanted to chalk up some of it to the Brazil game, right? Like when you watch the times that these guys are blocked and they look like they're on, you know, ice skates. They're on ice. But it happened at home on normal turf in Philly. And I think it's a concern going up against a Saints offensive line, which has been the most impressive unit in the NFL so far this year, with Eric McCoy being the best center in the league and Cesar Ruiz playing the best ball of his career. So on paper, through 2 games, the Saints offensive line should have success against this Eagles defensive line.
Yeah, it should. Bryce Huff has been arguably the most efficient pass rusher in the NFL over the last few years as a situational guy for the Jets. He was the most efficient pass rusher in terms of pass rush win rate in 2022. He was the 3rd most efficient. And remember, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, like all these guys are at the peak of their powers, Max Crosby, etc. The most efficient, the most successful on a per rush basis has been Bryce Huff. 3rd last year. Through 2 games, he's 147th, I think. His pass rush win rate has gone from over 20%, 25% in 2022, 20-something percent last year, down to 6-point-something percent, which is like not a good pass rush win rate for a slow nose tackle, let alone a situational edge rusher. He's just brought nothing so far through 2 games. And the Eagles, like, they just have him as part of the rotation, but they're not even putting him in a designated pass rusher type of dynamic. He's playing basically the same amount of run snaps as he is pass rushing snaps, and he's not playing a ton of either of them. Like, they have him basically the same kind of division of labor as a guy like Brandon Graham. they're just not getting what they thought out of Bryce Huff, and they're not yet changing what his role is to try and get him back to that kind of role. Like maybe he is going to be a Yannick Ngakoue type of player where you say, I don't want you even thinking about the run ever. Just go after the quarterback, and then you have to work out what his role is going to be from a snap basis to make that happen. Right now, that's not happening, and he's not getting any pass rush because of that.
We might be robbed of a great matchup here with A.J. Brown likely missing this week as well with the hamstring. Marshawn Lattimore on the other side with the Saints been limited at practice. Look, A.J. Brown is an absolute game changer out there. We like at a high level, the difference in production from a Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee to when he got to Philly with Jalen Hurts to just what we saw in week 1, where before you know it, he's got a 65-yard touchdown and the Eagles are back in the game. So it's a huge loss for the Eagles not having A.J. Brown out there. I think Jalen Hurts played a little bit better after the first 5 quarters of the season where he was a little careless with the ball. Played better down the stretch, but he's got to play a really clean game. The other thing I'll say about Derek Carr on the other side is he's been awesome through 2 weeks. I think it's going to be really tough for Derek Carr to keep it up, right? Like at some point, Rashid Shaheed's going to run the deep post that he keeps hitting, and he's just going to miss him, right? Like you can't hit one of those every single week, right? At some point, Derek Carr probably comes back down to earth, or does he keep this up forever and it's like a 2016 Matt Ryan season where it's start to finish, it's like the combination with the skill players, with the play callers, and it's like, boom, career year, Derek Carr. But I'm expecting some kind of regression there, right?
There's probably going to be some on the basis that he's playing out of his mind right now. Like he has attempted 5 deep shots and hit 3 of them, and they've gone for 168 yards. So
yeah,
that's unsustainable. Like that's a level that you generally, high-end quarterbacks, if you can get anywhere near 50% on those deep shots, you are wildly overachieving.
I'm going out on a limb that he's going to regress from his 11 yards per attempt and 142 passer rating.
Yeah, that too. But even just restricting it to the deep shot stuff, right? Like if you can clear 50%, you're probably the best deep passing quarterback in the NFL in a given season, and he's right now, 66% or whatever. So that's or 60%. So that's definitely going to come back down to earth at some point. But the other stuff I think can probably stay pretty high. Like I think his level can stay where it is. It's just that insane strike rate on the deep ball might come down.
All right, last thing before the picks here. Intern Anthony puts a note in for us. The Eagles, dating back to last season, have lost 7 of the last 9, and in 3 of the Eagles' previous 8 games, they have led in the final 2 minutes and lost. In 2022, I thought Nick Sirianni was on his way to becoming one of the better coaches in the NFL. He had this mix of aggressiveness at the right time, forward thinking, fourth down decisions, much like Doug Peterson had early in his Eagles tenure that led to a Super Bowl. Sirianni led to the verge of a Super Bowl. But are we losing some of that game management ability? Are they losing some of that? Is that a concern for the Eagles? It's just an interesting note as last year's collapse, as we talked about a ton, was almost unprecedented, and now all of a sudden, just after blowing a game on Monday Night Football, those questions come back again.
Yeah, I mean, we said it coming out of that game that both sides of the ball collapsed, right? Like the offense found the worst combination of plays to call or to make, the worst combination of decisions to make with that 3rd and 4th down decision, and then the defense collapsed and allowed an easy, comfortable touchdown drive from Atlanta with the clock. The clock became a factor in the opposite direction, right? Like they actually scored too fast. They gave Philadelphia a chance to come back and, score points on the other side, which again didn't happen, by the way. So another 2 offensive failures, 1 defensive failure, but both of them ultimately come back to the head coach. Like they're his responsibility at the end of the day. And we are now creating these sort of statistical trends of, oh, look how many of these collapses the Eagles have had in the last couple of years. This is why Sirianni's job is in jeopardy.
One other matchup to watch real quick. Chase Young, 9 pressures in 2 games. The Saints took a 1-year flyer on him. 9 pressures in 2 games going up against Jordan Mailata at left tackle. Be a fun one to watch. All right, Saints by 2.5, Sam. Where are you going with this one?
I am going with the Saints. I'm buying into what I've seen from them so far.
I am too. I am. I spend a lot of time early in the season trying to go back to my priors, maybe justifying what we saw isn't real, And here I am, believing in the Saints. I'll take the Saints to cover the 2.5. And I'll just say, narrative-wise, Philly radio on Monday, if they lose, could be ugly. A lot of narrative stuff, I think, attached to this one. If the Saints lose, fine, on their end. But if the Eagles lose, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, particularly depending on how as well.
Yes, absolutely, depending on how. Baltimore Ravens at the Dallas Cowboys. This is a 4:25 game on Sunday. Ravens favored by 1.5 in Dallas. Ravens are 0-2. Dallas 1-1 coming off of that beatdown at the hands of the aforementioned Saints.
The bounce back bowl. Somebody's got to bounce back, right?
Someone has to bounce back. Ravens, both teams disappointing in different ways last week. Ravens blowing a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, and of course Dallas absolutely wrecked on the defensive side of the ball. Couldn't do much offensively against the Saints, the juggernaut Saints. I think the most alarming thing for the Cowboys that happened at home. They're the team that's usually the team that wins by 3 scores, 4 scores, that lays it on, that runs away with it, that is a front runner, and Dallas had it handed to them last week.
They did. On the other hand, so this is like who's under the most pressure coming into this game. Like Dallas got absolutely annihilated by the Saints, but Baltimore is staring 0-3 in the face, having been a supposed contender coming into the season. Okay, they faced if they lose this game, they will have faced 2 theoretical also contenders and good teams, and the Raiders, who that was one that definitely slipped away. But if Baltimore starts 0-3, I mean that's a disaster for them. Meanwhile, Dallas, again, expected to be a contender, but if they get annihilated by the Saints, then lose to Baltimore as well, like just a ton of pressure on 2 sides that expect to be playing football in January.
So when I look at this matchup on paper, watch the film from last week, and the Dallas defensive line getting blown off the ball. I mean, so Jordan Phillips was one of those guys who struggled up front at defensive tackle. He's injured and on IR now. But you've got guys like Osa Odigizua, who's more of an undersized pass rush type that they're asking to play defensive tackle. Mozzie Smith, who hasn't been good, right? Yep. Weight issues, whatever, but just hasn't been good for a year plus as a rookie. Sneaky loss this offseason of Jonathan Hankins, 340-pounder who, whenever he was out there, for whatever reason, the Dallas defense was better. Even if his down-to-down production didn't show up in a grade or anything like that, their run defense was better. And this is like that multi-year issue of Dallas where they have games where they're just out-physicaled. And when you put that up against the Ravens with Derrick Henry back there, with Lamar Jackson back there, and how much they want to run the ball, on paper, the Ravens should dominate that side of the ball, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how incapable Dallas have been of solving this problem for years. Like the interior of that defensive line has just been soft and weak and unable to stand up to opposing run games. And if you go to premium stats in PFF Plus in your subscription there, the bottom 3 graded players for that Dallas defense right now are all interior defensive linemen, and they're all in the 20s. Like, that can't work. You can't play football that way, particularly not this year of all years when we're seeing a resurgence in the run game in teams trying to, overpower you with that as opposed to playing pass first and, if we defend the run along the way, fine. Like, their best run defender is Micah Parsons, who is this dynamic, like, absurd pass rushing Tasmanian devil. He's also the best run defender they have. That's not good. What was interesting, if you watch the Saints game, if you found a clean sort of pure pass set rep, Dallas was winning it, right? Like Micah Parsons, every time they actually got him into a one-on-one situation, where it's a clean, a true drop back, Parsons was winning almost instantly. There was almost none of them because the Saints just kept them out of those situations. They just ran the ball. They specifically kept away from those potentially problematic downs. That's the game plan right now. As long as you don't expose yourself to those true drop back 3rd and long type of plays, this Dallas defensive line gets neutralized and they can't stop the other stuff.
Now, I don't want to overrate Baltimore just based off reputation. Hey, they like to run the ball.
Right.
They're not running the ball this year because they're dominant up front. Daniel Faalele's first year starting at guard, Andrew Voorhees first year starting at guard. They haven't been great. It's not like Baltimore has these monsters that they used to have that have the mismatch advantage against Dallas. I think the run game here is Derrick Henry's tough to tackle, and Lamar Jackson's tough to tackle and contain, more so than Baltimore's just going to win up front. But that's a concern for me for the Cowboys. And look, I've poo-pooed the running game, as I've said before, right? But at some point, like, does Dallas have enough of their own running game to win these games, to win these different types of games where it's not Dak Prescott has to be perfect and CeeDee Lamb has to have 20 targets? I don't know if Dallas has enough weapons on that side of the ball to put it all on Dak. You know, are the Rico Dowdles and Zeke Elliott's of the world explosive enough to even average, 4.2 yards per carry just to stay in manageable down and distance situations?
Yeah.
So I have some concerns about Dallas, and obviously concerns about the Ravens coming off this collapse last week. But it feels like one of those games where Lamar says, "Hey, we're 0-2." He treats it like week 1 and starts to try to take over the game.
Right. Yeah, and they might need him to. This might be the game with the most pressure on it in terms of both sides collectively.
Yeah. And again, I think there's interesting matchups here. And if Dallas had won last week and they were 2-0 and we had low expectations for the Saints coming in, at least I did, and the Browns are okay, the narrative would more be like, all right, first test for the Cowboys to beat a good team, because they've struggled, much like the Dolphins, struggled to beat good teams. But that still exists right now against Baltimore. And then from Baltimore's standpoint, like, you can't go 0-3, right? You can't go 0-3 in the AFC at this point, can you?
Right.
For a team that had the number 1 seed last year and was expected to do a lot more. So you're right. Probably the most pressure on both sides of the ball. And a lot of fun matchups to watch here.
Yep.
All right. Baltimore favored by 1.5 in Dallas.
Yeah, I am picking Dallas, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I talked myself into Baltimore after this one. Interestingly, and I mean, I don't think the Ravens' offensive line have the pieces maybe to. It's the pillow fight aspect of things,
but it's
right?
but it's specifically the run game where they can potentially do the damage. Like, the Baltimore defense or the Baltimore offensive line is definitely not in great shape, but if they can do a sort of imitation of what the Saints did last week, which is just minimize the situations where that exposes itself, their weakness is definitely stronger than Dallas's weakness when it comes to the run game.
One last thing I'll talk you into. Mike Zimmer. Does he make this adjustment, right? He's not going to live with defensive tackles getting blown off the ball 6 yards.
Yeah, but the problem with that is it's the antithesis of what everyone else is doing. The only way of essentially, you can commit to stopping the run, right? We've said this before. It's like, to an extent, it's a determination, desire type of thing, right? You can just stuff the line of scrimmage with bodies and say you're not running the ball, but you can't do that at the same time as playing the 2 high coverage shells that people want to get to at the moment and are taking away these explosive plays. Now, against Baltimore, maybe that's a risk you run because you're like, they don't have the receivers to take advantage of that.
That's what I'm thinking.
But you might have to commit to that, to like, okay, we need to completely change what the current way of doing it is, because we're getting gashed in the run game, and we're going to gamble that Baltimore doesn't have the firepower in the passing game to expose single high coverage, man coverage, those types of things.
Trayvon Diggs is limited. See what happens with practice. Cornerback for the Cowboys. I could see Mike Zimmer going full extreme. We're not getting gashed against the run. We're going 8 in the box. We're going in passing situations. We're doing our stuff, crowding the line of scrimmage, creating indecision, and that possibly causing issues for the Baltimore offensive line. And I'm not saying the blitz always works against Lamar, but there are those games where that offense has been overwhelmed by teams that blitz like crazy. Could see that playing out for Dallas in this one. Now I'm talking myself back into the other way. So you just paint this picture of what could happen. I'll take Baltimore, though. Harry's going with Dallas in the bounce back bowl. I like the way you laid that out. Bounce back bowl here. So you and Harry going with Dallas. I'll take Baltimore, covering the 1.5. Another great game now. Detroit Lions at the Arizona Cardinals. I think should I stop being a Cardinals hater every week? We'll see.
Probably.
Lions favored by 3 here in the desert, 4:25 game on Sunday.
I wonder if this game becomes a big shootout. It's hard to see how that Arizona defense can contain Detroit's offense, which means their offense is going to need a big game just to keep pace. You know, Kyler Murray right now is playing out of his mind. Incredible game last week. Like, genuinely, by a lot of statistical measures, that's like one of the better games that's been played by any quarterback in the last 10 years, right? It's absolutely phenomenal performance, insanely efficient, hit on everything, was clearly in the zone. Like, you saw that touchdown that he threw where he's celebrating before his, like, ball's 5 yards away from his intended receiver in the end zone. And it's not like the guy is sort of just catching it, standing there, you know, looking at the ball. Like, he's going to ground to catch this ball. It's a relatively easy catch, but plenty of scope for that guy to have dropped it and made Kyler Murray look like an idiot. Instead, he's just like, he knows it's happening. Did it. Nailed it. Got it.
He's feeling it, man.
Yeah, he's absolutely in that zone right now.
But the analyst in me said, well, certainly, again, not going out on a limb, he's probably not going to play as efficient of a game.
And he also, like, he might need to play at that level for them to have any shot at this game or even keep it close, because their defense looks dramatically outmatched by Detroit's offense.
Yeah, so the reasons why I've picked against Arizona stem mostly from their defense, both against the run and in the pass game. And they've been a little bit better than maybe I had expected. But this should be a game, right, where Detroit wins up front with their offensive line. They've been a little bit leaky as far as pass pro goes. And then let's play the quarterback game here. The traditional analysis would say Kyler Murray's playing at a ridiculously high level. Jared Goff has been underwhelming to this point. Therefore, you know, you expect those two things to happen. I would actually go the other way and say I don't think Goff's going to play this poorly, right? He did make some nice throws against Tampa Bay. He's just got to take better care of the ball. And in crunch time, take better care of the ball than he has these first couple weeks. He's still making decent throws outside of the turnover where he plays. And then Kyler playing like near perfect ball in week 2 and really well in week 1, you know, that regress just a little bit. So I'm leaning Detroit in their own bounce back coming off a disappointing loss against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, the other thing is we're now 3 consecutive games of Aiden Hutchinson facing a backup offensive tackle. Like,
Yes.
Do you remember a couple of years ago where Max Crosby had a run where he faced just a slate of awful offensive tackles?
Every week we'd try to be like, Crosby, 12 pressures. Crosby, 10 pressures.
Yeah.
You'd say, well, you know, let's see who he's facing.
Well, it was more like, is this for real? Is Max Crosby actually this good, or is he just run up against like a historically terrible slate of offensive tackles? And I think the answer was both. Yes, he was actually that good, but he was also facing a ridiculous slate of offensive tackles. I think that's also where we are with Aiden Hutchinson, right? Like, he leads the league in pressures according to PFF, 17 versus 15, too clear of anybody else. He's also got a 95 pass rushing grade, which means the pressures are coming quickly, decisively, like he's winning well, as in addition to just winning. But he's faced 2 backups now, and he's going up against a third because
Kelvin Beachum, though, he's starting caliber.
ish.
Or
I
at
mean,
least
he's
he has
marginal starting caliber. The point being, it's a weak area, right? Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't great to begin with Jonah Williams, and it got worse going to his backup. So for the 3rd straight game, Aiden Hutchinson is going to be a problem for the offense. And it's not like you can deal with it, but that's the game plan this week for Arizona, right? The game plan is not how do we attack Detroit's defense, where are the matchup. Like, the game plan is, okay, what do we have left on the table after we've assigned all of the plays so that Aiden Hutchinson has a chip blocker or, you know, extra help to that side, or we're running away from him. Like, you immediately cut down your playbook into whatever that is, like a third of what it normally is, and say, all right, now what is the game plan? So it's a factor. Before they've even stepped foot on the field, Aiden Hutchinson has impacted this game now.
Just to put some numbers to the QB matchup through 2 weeks. Just remember what 2 weeks is, right? Remember, historically, I used to have to, we do like a lot of radio hits when we were working for PFF and be like, why is this QB ranked 3rd? It's like a couple throws away from being ranked 15th. Like, it's just, it's early. It's just,
Right.
Everything's a small sample. So take this with that grain of salt, right? But Kyler has the highest PFF grade so far this year. A ridiculous 13% of his passes have been big-time throws, right? The league leader's usually at 5. You know, he's at 13%. He did have 8% one year. So he's playing at an incredible rate. Jared Goff has the 4th worst passing grade this year. it is Bryce Young, Will Levis, Bo Nix, and Jared Goff. And so we spent a lot of time the last couple of years going the other way, being like, hey, Goff's getting away with some stuff, and maybe he's not playing as well as the stats would show for Detroit. In Lions fans are like, man, we found our guy. We got Goff. Well, so far this year, it has not been great. He's got 3 picks, 4 turnover-worthy plays, but he's better than that. I expect Goff to get better. Should be a get-right game for him against this Arizona defense. I'm diminishing them again. Underrating the Arizona defense again. Should be a get-right game for him. I'm not saying Kyler's going to come back down to earth. He will a little bit, but I think Kyler's on his way to maybe an MVP caliber season. Like, I think he can keep this up, so it should be, as you mentioned, potentially a shootout and a great matchup.
This is maybe a Wednesday conversation at some point, and in some way determined by whether or not the trend continues. But if this season is going to be a down year for offense and defenses have successfully fought back and all these too high coverage shells, et cetera, I wonder if there are certain quarterbacks that are impacted by that disproportionately than others, right? And if Jared Goff is one of those quarterbacks that in this, when forced into a new world of defensive ascendancy, if Jared Goff is going to be impacted more than some other quarterbacks, or as you said, if for just 2 weeks of bad play.
Kyler's been defense proof so far.
Yeah.
Get to see Marvin Harrison Jr. out there again, see what happens after a dud week 1, stud week 2, see what happens here in week 3. Another fun matchup. Lions by 3 here in Arizona. Where are you going with it?
I'm going with Detroit. I just struggle to see how Arizona stops the Lions offense. I don't know if they can keep pace.
Yeah, I'll take Detroit too. This is one of the weeks I'll lean on the Priors a little bit more, and still think Detroit has powerhouse potential despite the loss last week. We don't want to overrate just wins and losses. So I'll take the Lions to cover the 3 here. Harry's going with the Cardinals. He's a believer in Arizona right now. Another awesome. These are fun matchups this week. That's why they're at the top of the show. Houston Texans at the Minnesota Vikings. Texans favored by 2.5 in Minnesota. Of course, storyline-wise, second straight week, you get Brian Flores in that Minnesota defense going up against the Kyle Shanahan first, and then Kyle's little buddy, Bobby Slowick.
Kyle's little buddy?
Yeah,
that's
Bobby.
how you're going to characterize him?
Yeah. I mean, Bobby's younger. I don't know how size-wise. They're probably about the same size. It's Buddy.
I've never seen in person Kyle Shanahan. Is he?
I saw Kyle over. He's probably a little bigger than Bobby.
Bobby's not the biggest
No,
out there.
it's a little bigger.
Yeah.
I saw Kyle out in the Combine one time, out in Indy.
Flores, or no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong team. Does Flores face Minnesota this year? Or not Minnesota, Miami this year?
Doubtful.
No, they
if
don't.
they're playing Houston, yeah. That would be funny. So this reminds me of last year, the Ravens played... Was it the Ravens that played? Yeah, so the Ravens played Miami and San Francisco back-to-back straight weeks. And the Ravens scheme was all the rage. Mike McDonald, that's what got him the job in Seattle. And the Ravens shut down both schemes.
Right.
The same scheme, back-to-back weeks. Against Miami, I forget the order, but it was Miami and San Francisco, back-to-back weeks. And so this reminds me of a baseball analogy, of course, Sam, right? The old, like, who has the advantage? The more a pitcher and a hitter face each other, who has the advantage, right? Because you have these matchups, you've got these, it's usually the hitter, I think, over time, people think have the advantage. So who has the advantage here? Does Bobby, he's sitting here game planning, looking exactly how Minnesota is going to attack his scheme, right? Because they just did it last week. Or is it Minnesota who's like, I just saw all these concepts, I know exactly how to attack it, just saw it last week, and of course did a very good job against it.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, it seems, so obviously we've only really got last season's for Minnesota-San Francisco game and then this season's Minnesota-San Francisco game. It seems like the team that learned from the first matchup better was Minnesota. And I don't even just mean on that side of the ball, Flores versus Shanahan, but like the 97-yard pass to Justin Jefferson, that was basically set up from the previous game. They ran that play the game before, and they hit the crosser over the middle. And when they looked at it, the deep post was actually wide open behind it. And they were like, hey, look, if you get this look again, think about the one over the top, because the last time we ran it, it was open. So it actually seems like Kevin O'Connell was the coach that took the most out of that. Maybe Flores has been winning relative to the matchup as well. But yeah, Brian Flores in that defense going up against Bobby Slowick's version of the Kyle Shanahan offense is going to be fascinating to watch. And poor old Bobby's got to do it without his running back that he was so attached to this offseason. Joe Mixon, we've seen through a couple of weeks like the impact that he can make, why Bobby wanted that type of player. He's not playing. Damian Pierce isn't playing either. It's Cam Akers' revenge game at running back. So that's not ideal from Bobby's point of view. On the other hand, I am curious to see, does C.J. Stroud see this defense any better than Brock Purdy has through 2 games? Like, part of the dynamic of Flores beating Shanahan effectively is got to be the quarterback, right? Shanahan's obviously doing his part, but the quarterback has to understand what he's looking at, diagnose the reads, figure out where he's supposed to go with the ball. Purdy struggled twice now against this defense, and judging from that tiny little soundbite after the game, recognizes it. He's like telling Flores that he runs this crazy scheme. Stroud's been so impressive through a season and 2 games. Like, he just looks to be getting better and better. He's seeing everything well. Does Stroud have a better view of this defense than Purdy?
And just to, again, add color to that, what we described on Monday morning reviewing that show, when Minnesota blitzed, Brock Purdy's average time to throw is around 3 seconds, which is generally one of the longer times to throw for any drop back in the entire league for an individual player. Against the blitz, you're almost certainly getting rid of it in like 2.3, 2.4. Right. And so it wasn't even that there was a ton of pressure every single play.
It was indecision.
It was indecision, right? And so when we talk about the matchup in a scheme, what is it that Flores can do? You always talked about Kyle Shanahan going up against the old Seattle cover 3, and you would say he knows what the rules are.
Right.
He breaks the rules. Is that what Flores has figured out? He knows he knows where the strengths are and takes away the strengths immediately, takes away the first read immediately, and has this good feel for how to do that, which immediately creates that indecision. Because Purdy's not an indecisive quarterback. He is usually getting to read 2 and 3 pretty well. That's what's made Brock Purdy so special since he's taken over. But for whatever reason, Flores has done a really nice job of taking away all of that.
I think it's part that, and it's part just the chaotic look of this defense every snap. Like, it is mandating the quarterback to spend some time between snapping the ball and throwing the ball to diagnose where the hell everyone is going to end up. I mean, Mike Renner posted a shot of like all these Vikings defenders up at the line of scrimmage and was like, they ran Tampa 2 from this look, right? Like that, Tampa 2, perfectly easy thing for the quarterback to diagnose. The problem is there's a span of time between this jumble of people at the line and, oh, look, it's Tampa 2, where the quarterback is dropping back trying to figure out what the play is. That's what he forces you to do every time. It reminds me a little bit, Rex Ryan's defense back in the day used to be a bit like this, right? When there were DBs everywhere and you had to figure out who was rushing, who was dropping, what the look was going to be behind it.
And it was mostly a creative way of playing man behind it, but you didn't know where the blitz was coming from.
Exactly. And it was that moment of chaos and indecision that was so valuable. And look, that stresses players. Like, it put the defense, like, it puts a lot on some of these defenders, and it's why not every team does it. But there's an inherent value to that every single time, because the quarterback can't guarantee what he's looking at pre-snap, right? And so many quarterbacks, half the decision is made pre-snap, right? And then it's like, oh, let's just verify it post-snap, or read the adjustment or whatever. Flores is basically forcing you to do everything post-snap every single time. And a lot of these plays are drawn up to be pretty quick, right? So you don't have that kind of time to work out what you're looking at and then verify if your play is going to work and then junk it if it's not and go somewhere else. This is why this defense is killing people right now.
Yeah, so this is going to be a really fun matchup. I kind of like the response in the chat here by TB17 says, I think Stroud doesn't consciously think, which is what makes him so good. He just subconsciously reacts.
Which is ironically the type of thing that the S2 test would give you like a 95 for, except he intentionally tanked the test.
I'm not saying that he's 100% right or whatever on this. I'm just saying, like, Stroud did have that play the other day. Like, all of the plays that we didn't know that he had in his bag consistently, he seems to have, right? When he juked an unblocked defender and made that beautiful pinpoint throw on the run the other day, I've been so impressed with Stroud's ability to do that at the NFL level. In addition to, I just think he's very good at just mechanically, right? At going through his reads, being set, being ready to throw. Nate Tice does a really good job of this, of taking throws that look easy that Stroud makes, that when you really think about it, it's like, man, that's like 20 yards on a line on the front number. And it's really accurate, and it's a deep out, and he might throw it like a touch late, but it's got to be perfect accuracy-wise, and it is. And Stroud has a lot of that ability. So I think Stroud, his skill set should maybe have more success against Flores. The other interesting thing about matchups, the Lions and Jared Goff, we were just talking about, they do great against this Minnesota defense. Remember the times last year where Flores tried to blitz Goff and his passer rating was like $140 and all this stuff. I mean, sometimes the matchups, like, does Ben Johnson just, have the answers to Flores' defense, and Kyle and his friends haven't yet. So we'll see. I don't know where the advantage is having this as like a back-to-back week type of thing.
The only point I would make about that, the Detroit thing, is that they faced them late in the season twice. So they had 3/4 of the season's worth of tape by the time they ran into Minnesota.
True.
Which is different, I think, than playing them in week 3.
And we used to oversimplify Flores' defense last year and say, well, he's rushing 3 the most and he's rushing 6 the most. It's not that necessarily right now. He's expanding. Either way, it's a lot of disguise, it's a lot of indecision creating, and it's certainly creative blitz packages.
And they have better players now.
And they have better players that are playing pretty well.
Yeah.
On the other side, we still have Sam Darnold watch. We joke about how he plays in the first 3 weeks versus 4 and all that, but it's a funny joke. We've got the Ginger watch as well. We've got the theory that maybe Andy Dalton's going to steal it from Darnold, who we've declared a Ginger, whether he's a light brown-haired man or not. That's a thing. I'm just thinking about the Texans, and I believe they're a great all-around team. The potential to be a great all-around team. Their pass rush, their playmakers in the secondary, in addition to what they have offensively. A little concerned about the lack of Mixon. I thought Mixon added something to that offense, but fun matchup here. I just think the Texans, man, are one of the better all-around teams in the league.
Yeah, a lot of revenge games in this game. We've got Grenard, you've got Danielle Hunter, you got Cam Akers, a lot of sort of returns.
And they flipped Grenard and Hunter.
So far through 2 games, Darnold has been spectacular when blitzed, not spectacular when pressured. So it's a key thing. Like, can the Texans get pressure on Darnold without blitzing him? Do they just say, to hell with it, we're going to risk it and blitz him anyway? That, I think, is a pretty interesting dynamic.
And, of course, look, it's 2 weeks, so here are the samples. But, like, the Texans' EPA per play against when blitzing, best in the league.
Right.
Because they just faced Caleb Williams and the Bears, who could not handle the blitz whatsoever. Was that the Texans or was that the Bears? All right, man. Texans, favored by 2.5 here at Minnesota. Where are you going with this?
I'm going to go with the Texans. I have a feeling that Stroud is going to look better against this defense than Purdy has twice.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'll take the Texans. Harry's going to go Minnesota. But, like, the other aspect of it is, as much as I've liked the way the Texans have relied on the run game the first couple weeks as a different way of winning, like, if they have to put the ball in Stroud's hands and say, hey, go back, drop back 45, 50 times, go win it for us, I think they're capable of doing that with the way Nico Collins is playing and what Stephon Diggs is capable of and Tank Dell. Like, they have all those playmakers for a reason, different ways to win. So I'll take the Texans to win it on the road and cover by cover the 3, 2.5. San Francisco 49ers at the Los Angeles Rams, another Sunday 4:25 game. The Niners favored by 7. Brutal injury risk.
Just crazy.
Both of our notes are just the injury list.
Is anybody left healthy for this game?
This feels like a read the injury report game.
It really is. Like, everyone's hurt. So, obviously, Christian McCaffrey on IR, he's out. Cooper Kupp is down, but not on IR. They think he'll be back within the 4 weeks. They've put multiple offensive linemen on IR, right? The Rams.
The Niners, it's more about the big names, right?
Yes.
McCaffrey's on IR. Deebo
Deebo's
Samuel is out with a calf. He's doubtful, but I mean, he's going to be out. The Rams, my goodness, it does feel like 2022 again.
It's crazy.
Cooper Kupp, he's officially listed as doubtful. We know he's not playing. Yeah. Puka Nacua is on IR. The other IR players for the Rams: Jonah Jackson, starting guard; John Johnson, starting safety; Puka, who I mentioned; Steve Avila, starting guard, slender, whatever; Joe Noteboom, starting tackle; Darius Williams, starting corner;
and Alaric Jackson. Is Alaric Jackson back now? How long is his suspension?
Who?
Alaric Jackson.
I don't know. Trey Tomlinson on IR as well. Tyler Higbee, starting tight end, out.
Yeah, Alaric Jackson's suspension was only 2 games, so he's eligible to be back for this game.
So there you go.
It's ideal because
there's some good news. I mean, also questionable, Davis Allen, the tight end, Kobe Durant, the corner, Kevin Dotson, the guard. So literally the starting 5 offensive linemen, the expected starting 5 offensive linemen are like 4 are either out or questionable.
Yeah.
3 are out. A 4th is questionable. Rob Havenstein's still there.
Right. I mean, I don't want to make this too simplistic and reductive, but to me, the 49ers are less banged up, therefore they win.
Yeah. I mean, you also have the whole matchup thing as well. So
which also favors Shanahan, yeah.
Shanahan's 10-5. The overall record's 10-5, Shanahan versus McVay. McVay won the last game against Shanahan, which was the Carson Wentz for the Rams, Week 18. Carson Wentz versus Sam Darnold matchup, which, remember, the Rams won the game so that they could earn the right to play the Lions in the playoffs, which was fun storyline-wise. But essentially every single regular season game has gone the way of the Niners over the last 4 or 5 years. The Rams did get the one NFC Championship win against Shanahan. For whatever reason, Shanahan gets the better of McVay, and now you have the advantage, at least injury-wise. We do have this question mark, though, of the whole wit-out stuff in San Francisco and Brock Purdy and what's happened when they didn't have a Trent Williams or didn't have a Deebo Samuel. Now it's missing Deebo and McCaffrey.
Yeah.
A little more pressure on Purdy maybe to step up in these situations.
Well, Deebo in particular, the wit-out numbers have been stark. Like, he seems to be, if you read into that stuff, uniquely important to that offense, and they're not having him in this game. So that is potentially important, definitely.
Jimmy G revenge game. He's back from his suspension, backing up. He's with the Rams now, by the way, for those who don't know. Backup QB for the Rams. Does Jimmy G have any insight? Is he going to help at all?
Well, with that offensive line, he might be an important factor in this game. Like,
Jimmy G,
Stafford's got to survive
tackle.
the game.
Emergency tackle. So, I mean, the only other thing I'll say is the Niners' defensive line that we highlighted before the season depleted from where it's been over the last couple of years. Are they able to exploit the Rams' backups in this one?
I mean, there's enough of them that you would think they should be able to.
They probably should.
Yeah. This would be, insanely impressive if the Rams are able to, even keep this close, let alone win. Like, if they're able to keep this tight, that's a phenomenal performance given the players they're missing.
The Rams were also, there's a lot of teams around the league that just got whooped up front. The Rams last week did. I love Kobe Turner. I mean, he was getting blown off the ball. Pretty much everybody was, besides, like we mentioned on Monday, Jared Verse has played pretty good ball for a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the Rams can handle the Niners' run game. I don't know if they can handle it up front. Jordan Mason's running really well. Line's blocking pretty well. So, anything else to add to this one?
Not really. Like, I think there's so many. It's a shame because we're not really watching the Rams versus the 49ers this year. We're watching these two banged up, depleted versions of each team. Like, a big thing has got to be, I joked about it, but, like, can Matthew Stafford actually make this work and survive behind that offensive line without his top 2 receivers? Stafford's had a strange career where I don't know if the narrative versus how good he's been has ever actually matched. But there might not be a quarterback with more on his shoulders this week than Stafford, who has to make this function basically by himself.
I'll just touch on it really quick, and again, maybe this is like a Wednesday deeper dive discussion. All of this talk about passing being down in the NFL, one of the ways I break that down is Stafford, in the last decade, I don't think was a top 10 quarterback relative to his peers. Now, you could ask the question, is Stafford top 5, top 8? Like, he's in this. I think that's a big reason why passing's down. I don't know that Stafford's better now than he was with Detroit, but I've been more impressed with Stafford since joining the Rams. They had the Super Bowl run. I thought last year he was fantastic in a year where maybe, the expectations were low. Again, a lot of pressure on him right now, but it feels like that 22 season where they had a different O-line combination every single week, and Stafford couldn't overcome that in 22. They couldn't, they were one of the worst teams in the league. So talking through it, I think I'm going back to San Francisco. I think I had the Rams as an underdog, but when you read the injury report, it is jarring.
Yeah, 7 points is a lot, particularly for a road team. But the Rams are just so badly banged up. It's hard to see how they could keep within that.
Harry's about to get grounded here. He calls me from Alexa.
Nice.
From my wife's phone.
Yeah.
So he called me
Yeah.
because he just says, "Hey Alexa, call Daddy, whatever, and
Yeah.
call Steve." It's kind of annoying.
Maybe it's an
But
important...
then it's like my wife's calling. She knows I'm on air, right? And I'm like, "Is it an emergency? You got it." And she's, "No, it's just Harry talking to Alexa."
Maybe Harry's got an important update in his picks.
Yeah, say only call if you want to, because he's taking the Rams here.
Right.
I'm taking the Niners. You're taking the Niners.
Maybe he's read the injury report and he's like,
Does
no,
he
I got to
listen?
make a switch.
Ask. Oh, I'll ask if he wants to flip to the Niners.
Yeah, text him back, find
Ask.
out if he's read important information that changes his pick.
To flip to the 49ers.
See, you're busy dismissing this as like a nuisance call. This could be...
Maybe he's watching live. He heard me talk about the Rams injury report. Given the
Right.
Rams injury report.
Like, this could be vital information. This is how you're busy. You're essentially undermining his
Should we
picks.
do, like, if Harry and I did like an Instagram live on like Friday to just go through his picks or something? Is that something you think could catch on?
Yeah, find out.
Find out. All right, I'm taking the Niners. You're taking the Niners. As of now, Harry's taking the Rams, but we'll see if he wants to make the switch here.
See if Alexa replies.
Sunday Night Football: Kansas City Chiefs at the Atlanta Falcons. Chiefs favored by, it's down to 3.5 here. Wow, it was at 5 just like 10 minutes ago. 3.5 here, Sunday Night Football, Chiefs at Falcons. Falcons 1-1, of course, Chiefs are 2-0.
All the smart money coming in on Kirk.
It is funny how much like a minute of football action changed a lot of perception.
I mean, if
it's
they'd
just
lost
narrative, man.
Right. If they'd lost that game, like if Philadelphia simply runs it twice, picks up the first down, ends the game. Cousins never has that drive. We are coming out of that game saying, all right, that was incrementally better from an offensive point of view, but Kirk Cousins looks like he can't throw the ball on outside the numbers. There's this offense is too limited. It's not going to work. Where's Kyle Pitts? Like it's crisis still. And instead, we get one drive where it goes, okay, Kirk Cousins' arm may be a problem. On the other hand, he's smart enough and good enough that he can still deliver the ball, make a game-winning drive against a good team, theoretically, blah, blah, blah. It's all good, right? I even saw somebody, who was it? I read an article that was like, this justifies the entire Falcons' approach to the quarterback room. Cousins is still capable of being a contender. Look at this statement win. Meanwhile, Michael Penix is there, yada, yada. It was like, okay, let's tap the brakes a little bit. Like, I'm not sure this game showed that Atlanta are headed to the playoffs yet, given where everyone else is in that division. But you're right. It's a huge difference, in particular, because this game was on the horizon, right?
Yeah.
And I texted you this at some point. Zach Robinson, our former colleague at
I thought you were going to say former friend.
former
Current
colleague,
friend, former colleague.
Current friend, former colleague, former alumni of this podcast.
Sure is.
With the Browns rule, we have the legacy.
Yeah.
That guy's opening run, right? Week 1, you got to face TJ Watt. Week 2, you got Vic Fangio's defense to deal with. Week 3, you got Spags' defense to deal with. That's a tough run for a first-time play caller, first-time offensive coordinator to deal with. So I think they showed a lot of good things in terms of, like, they had a much more varied and functional offense in week 2, right? Under center, outside zone. There was a lot of things that worked relative to the first week. Now you got to keep taking steps forward because it's only getting harder.
First off, breaking news: Harry will switch his pick to the Niners.
You see?
We did get word, so I'm just going to assume he's watching live, and he was like, "Hey Alexa, call Dad. I got to flip the pick." So let's just say Niners. All three of us taking the Niners. Back to this game here. Yeah, I mean, we would be. First off, if you were to say the statement about justifying the Cousins thing, like nothing's justified after 2 weeks. That was like when whatever, doesn't matter. I will say, the idea of drafting and sitting a quarterback, the more the rest of the quarterbacks who have been thrown into the mix are struggling, and that Michael Penix is just sitting there and maybe sits there for 2 years learning, the more that like the other guys fail, the better that move looks.
Well, not even just that. Like, yeah, the more,
Or at least that strategy
yeah,
looks.
the more if Renner is correct from yesterday's show, and we are about to see the pendulum swinging hard back in the direction of sit those guys for a year or more. Like, the longer you can give them to develop from the sideline, the better. The Atlanta Falcons were ahead of the game, theoretically, because that was their plan with Michael Penix. And if that just becomes the way teams are doing it, they're a year ahead of everybody.
Yeah, I agree. On the Chiefs end here, you've got no Isaiah Pacheco. He's injured. Looks like Carson Steele.
Yes.
maybe going to get some more carries.
I
Who's run hard outside of the one fumble.
I am buying in. I am all on board the Carson Steele thing. Like I love it. Every now and again, there's a story, and everyone, it's generally I push back against the sort of this is the current in vogue comedy like cult hero type of thing. I just love the Carson Steele thing. He runs like he came out of a game in 1995, and it's just fun, right?
It is fun.
It's like it's like a modern day. What's his name? The guy that was on the Madden cover came out of that Arkansas. Peyton Hillis. He's a modern Peyton Hillis. And everyone loved Peyton Hillis. Okay, it didn't last very long, and maybe you got sick of it after a while. But for a period of time, everybody loved Peyton Hillis, which is how he wound up on a Madden cover. Carson Steele is a modern Peyton Hillis.
The thing I love about Carson Steele and Isaiah Pacheco for this offense, I've said it a million times, is just the fact that it provides a different type of difficult to tackle. A different type of, so you need physical people to gang tackle Carson Steele and Isaiah Pacheco on every play. But then on the next play, you might have a dude with 4.21 speed, one-on-one, that you have to tackle in Xavier Worthy. And you have a Mahomes that you have to contain in the pocket. And you have a Travis Kelce. And so it just gives you all these different body types and styles to deal with. Travis Kelce's been quiet through 2 weeks. I'm smart enough to know that you don't write off Travis Kelce. Like we saw it last year. It's like, oh, is he getting older? He's got this injury. He's got this and that. And then playoffs, he just looks normal again.
Yeah.
So I think at any given point, he could just turn it on. But I also feel like his regular season production is going to start to, keep dwindling relative to previous expectations. That's a bit of a concern on a week-to-week basis if you're talking about what the Chiefs have for options. Because right now, Rashee Rice is the only guy consistently making plays on that offense. And the other thing I'll just say matchup-wise, Falcons with the second worst pass rush grade in the NFL per PFF Plus. Kind of expected this year. It's supposed to have one of the worst pass rushes, and they made a couple plays against Philly the other day, but that's probably an issue against Kansas City, not being able to get any pressure on Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, I've made this point a million times, but Travis Kelce's old, right? He's 10 months younger than Gronk. He should be declining, right? It doesn't make any sense if he's not declining, if he's just still, the best tight end in the NFL, still dynamic, amazing, unstoppable. That has to stop being the case at some point in his career. So it does make sense that we're going to see some sort of diminishing of it. And maybe this is how it works, right? That it's going to be slow and he's not going to be able to do it all the way through the regular season. But then when the game is on the line in the playoffs, he can summon that back for a while. Like maybe that's the way this is going to work. But it's only logical that he's going to stop being himself at some point in his career as he ages. And that's before you get to, now the man's got some things in his life other than football, right? Whether it's a billionaire, rich, famous girlfriend or his own show that's worth $100 million. Like, the man has distractions now that he didn't have 5 years ago.
It's true. As a full-time podcaster like Travis, it's difficult balancing other things.
Right.
Like football.
You certainly can't put in the kind of work that you did athletically 5 years ago.
That's right. Me and Travis Kelce and I, as our podcasts go this way,
yeah,
athletic careers go this way.
Yeah.
Travis and I are pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same person, yeah.
Minus the fact that their podcast just signed for $100 million.
Yeah.
Which we're open to, by the way. If you're listening, at Amazon or whoever, if you guys are open to it.
We haven't disclosed what we signed for, but it is. I can confirm that it's less than $100 million.
And we're appreciative of 33rd Team and everything that they've done, Mike T, and just not at that level.
No.
Not at that level yet.
And maybe some of that's our fault.
Could be on us.
Yeah.
It could be on us. Just got to work harder.
Point being, it makes sense.
What's up with this game?
It makes sense that he slowed down, right? I'm not expecting that necessarily to bounce back and completely transform and us to get vintage, peak Travis Kelce back in the regular season.
One thing I want to highlight about Kansas City's offense. Last year, they had Donovan Smith at left tackle.
Yep.
He got hurt. Rookie third-rounder Wanye Morris came in. He performed well below where Donovan Smith did. I think expectations for him were, he was okay relative to low expectations, but he still wasn't great. That was when Kansas City's offense hit a lull. On Sunday, Kingsley Suamataia, second straight game, kind of struggled a little bit in pass protection. Could not block Trey Hendrickson. Not a lot of people can. He ends up getting benched for Wanye Morris for a few plays at the end of the game. Wanye, I assume, will probably start. I assume he's going to start this week. If Suamataia got benched, because he's got a 42 PFF grade. Morris probably comes in and starts.
Well, this was
Just saying, like that one spot,
Yeah.
that left tackle spot at Kansas City, when it's been weak, has coincided with the entire offense being weak.
And really,
Weaker.
from all offseason, I was kind of expecting them to sign, a veteran off the street to address that and try and shore that up, and they didn't. They went into the season either confident that Kingsley could be the guy right out of the gate, or confident that the combination of Kingsley and Wanya was good enough. And this has probably been the worst case scenario for that, in that Suamatea has been overwhelmed, has been out of his depth so far, to the point where they took him out of a game, putting you in this limbo situation where you're like, do we give him the game back, or do we go with Wanya Morris, who hasn't looked good enough at that spot? I wonder if that's still on the table. Like David Bakhtiari, for example, is still out there kicking his feet up, waiting for a phone call. Like, do we reach a point in the season where the Chiefs go, we need a veteran to come in and shore this up ASAP, because it's going to be a problem?
Yeah, just something to keep an eye on. As I mentioned, though, I don't know if the Falcons have the people, the bodies to take advantage of it. Again, Matthew Judon does a good job. He's kind of like, one of those guys that has the high sack totals, doesn't have a ton of dominant one-on-one wins, but he can make some splash plays in there. That's why they brought him in. So matchup to keep an eye on. And I just want to see what this Atlanta offense looks like. I mean, it's difficult going against Spags, who'll be aggressive, play a lot more man coverage. Windows will be a little bit tighter. How does Cousins handle that? And does Spags, who's very game plan oriented, how much does he look at this and say, go ahead, Kirk, throw the ball outside the numbers, take those throws. I dare you to throw the 15-yard out, compress the middle of the field. There's a reason why Ray McLeod's leading the team in receptions and yards, I think both, because that's what's open, right? He's the slot receiver working the middle of the field, and, that's where Cousins is most comfortable right now.
Yeah. That's certainly, like, if you were watching that game, if you were Spags watching that game, you would come out of that saying, I am going to make him throw every single pass attempt outside the numbers and see what happens.
The old Chad Pennington game plan.
I'm going to force you to rely on your arm strength, and I don't think it's there.
All right, Chiefs by 3.5 here in Atlanta. Where are you going with this one?
Sadly, I am going with the Chiefs. I just think that Cousins showed too many limitations in that game, and it will be taken advantage of.
I'll take Kansas City as well. Harry's also going to take Kansas City. I'm also required anytime Mahomes plays in a dome game and has a fast receiver, there's a chance in the dome he could throw the ball 75 yards or whatever to Xavier Worthy behind the defense. So just keep an eye on it. You never know. I used to always expect that every time he had Tyreek Hill and they played in a dome.
Yeah.
So that's Sunday Night Football. Monday Night Football. We have a doubleheader this week, Sam. Doubleheader on Monday Night Football. I believe there's 3 of them this year. The new from the NFL to kind of sprinkle these in throughout the season here. The first game starts at 7:30 Monday night. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Buffalo Bills. Bills favored by 4.5. Anytime the Jags play in Buffalo, though, for our friend Matt Caller, I have to reminisce about the 96 Jags going into Buffalo as big underdogs. Mark Brunell pulling out the upset 30-27. Jim Kelly's last game. Jags on the way to the AFC Championship after beating Denver. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah.
I'm sure other people have those same memories.
Right. And now that's over with.
Yeah. Now it's Trevor Lawrence versus Josh Allen.
It is. Jacksonville need to find an underneath threat. Their offense has been disjointed. It hasn't really fired. Brian Thomas Jr. looks spectacular, and maybe he ends up being the underneath threat by almost default, if nothing else, by being the only guy that can do it.
Can I give you 2 numbers to back that up?
Sure.
Trevor Lawrence's average depth of target is 11.9.
Yeah.
11.9.
That's
making Jameis blush.
I was going to say, that's like over-aggressive Jameis.
Yes. 11.9. Now, again, it's 2 games, but his career high is 8.6. So we're talking 3.3 yards per pass deeper than he's used to throw, than his career high, which was last year. In turn, he's completing 51% of his passes, so that's like the trade-off, and he's taking more sacks. He's usually great at sack avoidance. He's been sacked a bunch more.
Right, and in part because he's doing it in a league that appears to be specifically taking that away and trying to force you to do the other thing, right? Like the Jags have zigged when everyone else is zagging, and I don't think it's working at the moment. Evan Engram, who's the obvious answer for that, like underneath target. Number 1 is hurt and might not be playing in this game. Number 2, he's got 4 targets through 2 weeks. Like the guy that should be the most obvious underneath weapon they have has not featured. Christian Kirk is the other guy that might be able to do it. He's got 7 targets, but only 2 catches. Most of those targets have been underneath stuff. But
Ingram banged up last week is big part of like him not being out there last week is a big part of why they needed to
throw the ball down the field. Right. This offense simply hasn't had an underneath horizontal threat yet. And it means everything's being funneled vertically to the area that defenses are taking away. The Bills have been ahead of that push. They've always played the type of defense that takes away those deep targets, right? So they're as good as anybody at doing it. Everything is forcing the Jags to find another way of playing offense right now, and they need to discover it this week. Otherwise, they get wrecked, really.
Yeah, so, it was one of those offseason narratives that, look, all the offseason narratives, sometimes for us, they get answered in week 1 or whatever. Like, this was a common question. They brought in Jacksonville, seemingly 2 vertical threats, and lost a Calvin Ridley who's not a pure vertical threat, is more of a 3-level threat. And so they've only challenged down the field vertically. Now you have a game like last week where Trevor Lawrence was, I forget what point in the game it was, but he only had 50 passing yards and they couldn't move the ball, and all of a sudden it hits a 66-yarder to Brian Thomas Jr. Like, that's really valuable. And Brian Thomas Jr. has been very impressive, particularly down the field. The Jag, and usually I'm in the mind of let's lean into a 10+ average depth of target. I love that as an aggressive style of play, but it has to match with what the defense is giving as well. So I think the Jags have to find that balance of throwing the ball underneath, still taking those shots over the top, and still they have to get that run game more consistent than it's been the last year plus.
Well, that's the other reason I think that the Jacksonville offense is struggling this year is, again, the defensive approach in the first couple of weeks is skewing towards taking away those explosives. The 2 ways of combating that are underneath horizontal passing and the run game. The Jags haven't found any underneath horizontal passing game, and their run game has been bad for a couple of years because that offensive line skews towards pass protection. So the Jags, I think, are being, again, disproportionately affected by the current trends in the NFL relative to other teams, which is why I think they've struggled more than other teams.
Bills through 2 weeks, they're coming off a pretty dominant win against Miami, the game that Tua got hurt last Thursday. So they got that little extra rest coming into this game, including the extra day going into Monday. So pretty much like a bye week almost for Buffalo. And then they beat Arizona, which didn't seem impressive after week 1, but maybe after week 2 is more impressive. But Buffalo's played pretty solid defensively, and offensively haven't had to do too much relying on Josh Allen to this point. He's played really efficiently. But they've had a solid run game. They haven't had to use their outside receivers a whole lot, so it's kind of like they've been really good and efficient on that side of the ball to this point, but it feels like they still have that trump card of, hey, we always have Josh Allen who could take over.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, has no turnovers through 2 weeks.
No turnovers?
No turnovers, I believe. Did I read that right somewhere? I don't know if it's turnover. He does have...
No interceptions, but he's got 2 turnovers.
No, he does have 2. He did have a fumble. There was no interceptions, but he had the fumble. He lost a fumble against Arizona. So carry on.
No, well, I think you're right. Like, they generally have not actually needed to lean on him that much so far this season, and that's been their goal for a couple of years, and it looked like actually this year was going to be the most they were going to need to lean on him because of the offensive turnover and no Stephon Diggs and this weird wide receiver group. Actually, they haven't. Like, he's played relatively within himself, and they're winning.
It's just funny looking at through 2 weeks, he's only got 42 passing attempts.
Yeah.
I mean, Derek Carr only has 39. You're not. Baker Mayfield only has 49. Like, there's a lot of those are all the 3 leaders in passer rating this year. I just happened to look at them. It's like a low volume, high efficiency passers that are having success. And most of those teams are running the ball effectively. Like, the Saints are running the ball effectively. Buffalo's running the ball effectively. Or you're getting, in Baker's case, a key scramble here and there. In Josh Allen's case, key scrambles to sprinkle it in. That all coincides with part of like these passing numbers being down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody did last year, but certainly in one of the last 2 seasons, Atlanta was the only team in the NFL that had that ran the ball more often than they passed the ball, right? And they were like 50.1% or whatever. It was just over 50%. This year, there are 6 teams right now that are above 50% run rate.
So narrative-wise, if Jacksonville falls to 0-3, Sam, 0-3, 1-7 or 1-8 in their last X number of games, gets bad in
Hot seat.
Jacksonville. If they can't win, and it's a challenging game in Buffalo as 4.5 point underdogs. So let's make some picks, man. First game of Monday Night Football. I'll be watching this probably from Paycor, going over the Bengals game. I'll be watching on the iPad.
Yeah, so if you're a viewer on YouTube waiting for our instant reaction from Monday Night Football is probably going to be Tuesday morning.
I apologize. That's my fault because I'm taking Harry to the game.
Right.
It
is
but
your
maybe
fault.
I'll just do it from the phone from the crowd.
From the crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I'm sure the audio quality on that will be outstanding.
It'll probably be somewhere in my house.
Paycor probably has better internet than you do.
Yeah. We'll talk to the Bengals media folks about setting us up with
Maybe PJ can give you the Wi-Fi password.
do they have? Forget it. No comment. Buffalo by 4.5 here Monday night. Where are you going with it?
I'm going with the Bills. I feel like this could actually get ugly for Jacksonville.
Yeah, I want to take Buffalo. Man, why did I wrote down Jacksonville?
I'm sure you had a good reason at the time.
Yeah, I thought Brunell was playing.
Yeah.
No, back against the wall, Jags. We'll keep it close. Back against the wall. They played in London last year, and it was close, right? Did the Jags pull it off?
In London. That's what
It was
you want
close.
to.
It's
That's what
close
you want
in
to cling to. The London game.
Harry's taking Buffalo. He's not a believer.
No.
If you love showcasing your NFL knowledge with some skin in the game, Locker is a must-have in your gaming arsenal. Locker contests combine the strategic elements of DFS with the thrill of sports betting into an exciting new game format. Simple to enter and easy to learn, Locker contests allow users to test their wits by answering questions in real time during live NFL games, with the goal of being to accurately predict the upcoming action on the field. By correctly answering straightforward game-based multiple-choice questions, such as which Jets player will have the most receiving yards on the next drive, or what will be the result of the Patriots' next drive, users can earn points and move up the leaderboard in pursuit of cash prizes. Locker offers both free-to-play games with cash jackpots as well as a variety of real money contests featuring different types of payout structures, including top-heavy contests and 50-50 contests. There are contests for every NFL game on the 2024 NFL schedule, so users can pick and choose when to play, whether it's all the primetime games, strictly the games of your favorite team, or any combination of your choice. Many contests are hosted by Locker's expansive partner network of athletes, celebrities, and influencers like Sam. And with chat functionality embedded directly into the app, users can directly engage with the contest host as well as other participants. This dynamic and integrated social experience allows users to celebrate wins, lament bad beats, and talk smack as the action heats up and the game plays out. If you sign up for Locker through 33rd Team, use code 33rd, and you get a $50 deposit match. Again, use the code 33rd, 33RD, get a $50 deposit match. Join today and discover an entirely new and unique way to cash in on your NFL viewing experience. Come join Sam and I as we play along. All right, let's go Miami Dolphins at the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks favored by 4.5. Your 2-0 Seahawks against the 1-1 Miami Dolphins with Skylar Thompson getting the start as Tua has officially been put onto the injured reserve with no expected timetable for a return coming off of his concussion.
Yeah, not a nice defense to get your first start this year, obviously, for Skylar Thompson. It's interesting. I mean, so Mike McDaniel, where's the coach speak index thing? How much does Mike McDaniel tell the truth versus lying? He's been talking up, Skylar's a totally different guy. You might recognize the player running the same things, but he's had so much time in the system now. He's a completely different human than the last time we saw him.
He was also, I would say he was impressive for an undrafted, I think he was undrafted, right? An undrafted backup.
Seventh
Or was he
round,
seventh?
I think.
I mean, he was impressive for that even when he filled in as a rookie in 2022.
Yeah, but it was very much on that curve, right?
But he was also, at some point, it was like, you're just going to be too overwhelmed.
Yeah.
He made a few plays in the playoff game against Buffalo, had some disastrous plays in there. The biggest story for me.
7th round pick, officially.
He was 7th round, I'm sorry. I apologize, Skylar.
Okay.
I apologize. I'm trying to make everybody undrafted like me, but some people do get drafted.
They do.
We talk a lot about the system and this and that and who gets all the stats. And one thing we've always said is say what you want about Tua and his stats, but there's parts of that system that he makes work with his quick release, his anticipation, and the Miami offensive line has never been great from a pass protection standpoint. This year, they're third worst in PFF pass blocking grade. Skyler's career average time to throw is 3 seconds, the very higher end of the spectrum. It's about half a second higher than Tua. So if Skyler's a new man, it needs to be in that sense where he's getting rid of the ball much quicker than he did. Again, mostly as a 7th-round rookie. If he's changed and is able to get rid of the ball quicker, that's going to be huge. If he's holding on to the ball, he's going to be under a ton of pressure, especially against the Seattle defensive front.
And listen, even just his cameo against Buffalo moved the needle on that pass blocking grade, right? Like Skylar Thompson was under pressure 31% of his dropbacks in that game. Tua was only 18%, right? Like the Skylar Thompson's, and that was a relatively quick moving game for him in terms of time to throw. It was like 2.7 seconds on average. So you're right, like him being on the field immediately stresses that offensive line significantly more than when Tua is back there, unless he's able to completely transform his game and get the ball out of his hands in a way he never has before, in a way we've never seen before. So yeah, like if Mike McDaniel is correct, and now that Skylar's been calling those plays for a while, he's been in the system for so long, it's a different guy. That's what we need to see, is him coming out, being immediately decisive, getting that ball out of his hands lightning quick, and like basically acting as his own safety net. Because if he doesn't, now you're going to see the weaknesses of that offensive line exposed, and that's going to only compound the problems and make his life more difficult.
On the other side, I think Miami's run defense, little hit or miss this year. We had a couple big plays against the Bills. They gave up some explosives against the Jags. I don't know. Mike McDonald has been coy about who's playing for his team. Ken Walker probably missing another game. I think their run game is a lot different with him versus Zach Charbonnet. But in week 1, when Ken Walker was out there, they ran the ball effectively. He gets to the second level pretty well. If he was to play, I think they'd have the opportunity for some big plays. Maybe Charbonnet limits it a little bit more compared to him, but also Geno Smith playing some really good football. And as we highlighted on Monday, Jackson Smith and Jigba being featured really for the first time in his career the way he was. They've got 3 legitimate pass catchers with him, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, and it really feels like a week to week, whatever the defense gives you, and Geno's delivering the ball on time and accurately for the most part this year.
Yeah, I mean, Miami's chance in this game, I think, actually focuses more on their defense than their offensive side. Like, they need to really get after that Seattle offensive line, which really has been Charles Cross being good and the rest of them not. So Miami's defensive front, it's obviously depleted from previously. Jalen Phillips looks really good, but they have got other guys, Zach Sealer, Chop Robinson, the rookie. They've been chipping in with linebackers as well in the blitz. They really need to get after that Seattle offensive line, both to slow down the run, but also to try and force this game to be a low-scoring, tight affair. Which, to be fair, the over/under thinks it will be. The over/under for this game is like 41.5 or something. So it's banking on a fairly tight game or fairly low-scoring game, right?
I think it'll be a good one. Again, to me, it's about Skylar Thompson playing mistake-free football and not taking sacks, negative plays, not turning the ball over against a really, really good Seattle secondary, ball-hawking secondary. So I've liked Seattle a lot throughout this offseason, been impressed with how they've played these first 2 weeks. 4.5, man, in Seattle. The only thing you have working against you is the Kev Clark tweet that he retweets every week. Seattle doesn't play
normal games. Yeah, that is unfortunate.
Which generally means they're playing games within 3 points
right.
Quite often. So can Seattle cover the 4.5 here at home? 4:05 Sunday, by the way, is the start time.
Hadn't really considered that. I am, however, just simply adding up Skylar Thompson plus the Seattle defense equals more than 4.5 points in Seattle's favor.
That's where I am.
Pretty much settling on that.
Yeah, that's where I am. It's it's an interesting one. Seattle's first place in the NFC West. If they move to 3-0,
I believe
start to get some momentum here.
I think this is my survivor pool pick as well.
Oh, is it?
I believe so. Let me just check that.
So the old strategy of picking against Carolina.
Well, I think, Andy Dalton absolutely complicates that. So I think my strategy is to just take whoever is facing the worst quarterback of the week.
Looks like Andy Dalton may have moved that line by 1.5 points, which also isn't.
Right. It is. Seattle is my pick this week.
Haven't made mine yet. We'll see. Harry's going with Miami here. I don't know if he knows about Tua's injury. But again, maybe he'll call from Alexa to change it before the
Wait,
end.
Tua's out? Change the pick.
Didn't know that. Dad, that Tua guy not playing? So you and I take Seattle. He'll take Miami. Los Angeles Chargers at the Pittsburgh Steelers Sunday, 1 p.m. The Steelers favored by 1.5. Couple 2-0 teams here. Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers. Good matchup.
Yeah.
You love when I just throw back every now and again?
It's really great.
It's great. It's really Justin Fields and Justin Herbert.
Yep.
Fields must have way more passing yards than Herbert right now, right?
No.
Where's Herbert?
Fields is, he had like 100 each. He
Yeah,
doesn't
but
have.
so did Herbert.
Right. But way more is not true. Whether or not it's more is different.
Okay, it's by what? Herbert has one more yard than Justin Fields.
Right. There you go.
All right, so if we're sitting here in our preview shows coming into the year, and we're going to say, listen, through 2 weeks, Justin Herbert's going to have 274 passing yards. Justin Fields is going to have 273, and they're both going to be 2-0.
If you just made these stat lines 1 week instead of 2, they'd be both solid games.
That's the NFL these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, Justin Herbert finished 31 of 46 for 274, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Makes sense. Yeah, we're 2 weeks into the season.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that doesn't make as much sense. Same
Justin
with
Fields with a solid 30 for 43 for 273, 1 touchdown, no picks. Good game,
good,
Justin.
Solid game.
I just took
that's 2
120 minutes instead of 60.
Right. It's bizarre.
That's it. Every NFL stat line looks like it's a game instead of 2
Right.
weeks.
It's just halved instead of you just have it and it looks good.
Hold on a minute while I tweet that out. That thought.
I'm really interested to see rookie offensive tackle Joe Alt now going up against TJ Watt. This guy is having a hell of a baptism of fire, and he's winning. We talked about him against Max Crosby, and he really got the better of that matchup. Crosby got his during the game as well. He still had a solid game, but generally speaking, those offensive tackles shut him down, including the rookie. This might be this is the kind of rookie of the year type of run. Like if he's able to go up against top tier defensive player of the year caliber players and win more often than not, Joe Alt should be getting recognized.
Start it now.
As
Do it.
Rookie of the year.
Joe Alt, Offensive Rookie of the Year campaign. Let's get behind it right
Seriously, forget this. Particularly now, none of these receivers, et cetera, nobody's lighting the league on fire, and yet we have an offensive tackle that is going up against Defensive Player of the Year candidate players and shutting them down. We should be recognizing that guy as a Rookie of the Year caliber player.
Especially if the quarterbacks are going to be horrible this year as
Sure.
rookies. Let's get Joe Alt. Now, he's one of PFF's highest graded tackles through 2 weeks? Or is he
The
higher?
Pepsi Rookie of the Week thing has 6 players you can choose from, and none of them were Joe Alt as a nominee.
Look, we don't work for PFF anymore, but obviously we're still using them and explaining the use of PFF. There's no excuse for not being able to properly evaluate offensive linemen and just say, oh, we don't have any information anymore. The information's good and it's useful, and so you can vote for offensive linemen. Now, you should be able to. Let's get the campaign going. If Joe Alt shuts down TJ Watt, he should be in the mix.
Yeah.
He should be the leader for offensive
Should already
Rookie
be in
of
the
year.
mix. If he shuts down TJ Watt, he should be the favorite.
Should be the favorite. He's given up 2 pressures in 2 weeks. Alt, number 11 PFF grade.
Right. And he's faced Max Crosby.
Yes. Which can crush people. We've seen what Myles Garrett, Dan Moore has a good grade this year for Pittsburgh on the other side at left tackle because he hasn't faced Myles Garrett and the Browns yet, right? They usually start the season with the Browns in one of the first 2 weeks, and all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, Dan Moore, he's terrible because one of the games he had a 20 pass block grade because he couldn't block Myles Garrett.
Right.
So Alt already had the Crosby game.
Yeah. And the second game, okay, Clowney.
The other one was against the Panthers.
But it was Clowney. Clowney it might be the down year for Clowney, but it's still, you can't, that's not that was a joke performance where you didn't face anybody. You faced Jadeveon Clowney and absolutely shut him down.
The only place Alt has struggled in 2 weeks was against when he was trying to down block or reach block Christian Wilkins for the Raiders. And Wilkins is a very good player.
Yeah.
That's it. Other than that, he's been
So
very good.
if he goes 3 weeks shutting down Max Crosby, dominating Jadeveon Clowney, and shutting down TJ Watt, that's not just favorite for Rookie of the Year. That's all pro caliber play right out of the gate.
Ooh. Yeah, somebody, ratio in the chat, should get ratioed if you could do that in the chat. He said Tyler Guyton shut down Myles Garrett. No love. I just go rewatch the plays.
Yeah.
Didn't really shut him down.
Not so much.
Also calls Crosby overrated, says he ain't even close to TJ Watt.
Also wrong.
Also disagree with that.
0 for 2.
Appreciate the interaction, though. I just disagree with both points.
Yeah.
Strongly.
Yeah.
Strongly. What else about this game? Chargers' run defense has been outstanding. Chargers' defense overall has been really good. Now, again, they played Minshew's Raiders.
Right.
However you want to interpret that, and Bryce Young's Panthers. And now you might say they're facing Justin Fields' Steelers. But I think the Chargers' defense has been night and day compared to where they've been the last couple of years.
So the Steelers' defense, only Gus Bradley's Indianapolis defense has run more cover 3 through 2 weeks than the Steelers. They are as extreme as it's going to get in that area through 2 games. What are they going to deploy against this Chargers offense that's running the ball like crazy, not putting it in the air that much? Are they going to roll that same thing, keep the single high guy, try and shut the run down? That's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the Steelers, in part, I think the Steelers' 4-man rush is as good as it gets around the league with Alex Highsmith and T.J. Watt, and the way Cam Hayward has, been able to get after the quarterback, and Keanu Benton to mix in there as a pass rusher. I think that's a big part of the Steelers trusting their 4-man rush at this point. At some point, do the Chargers have to throw the ball more to win a game? Or can they keep running?
I mean,
because the offensive line's blocked well. J.K. Dobbins has created those big plays.
It's not the way hardball works.
I know that. I'm just, at some point the game flow might dictate that. I've been impressed by the Chargers. I've been impressed by the Steelers too. Where are you going with this one? Steelers by 1.5.
Theoretically, this is probably the toughest test the Chargers have had so far. 2-0. One of them was against Carolina with Bryce Young, which is a disaster. It gets harder this week. Gets even harder the next week when they face the Chiefs. So we'll have a better idea of what the Chargers are in a couple of weeks' time versus these first 2 weeks. I'm going to go with the Steelers and say that this starts to swing back this week.
I'll say looking ahead to big playoff implications in this game potentially. I mean, I know Steelers fans might say, hey, we're in first place in the AFC North. We're in control of this thing. But the Steelers perhaps battling for a wild card, the Chargers almost certainly battling for a wild card. We've got some future playoff implications in this game here.
How do you think a week of board games has motivated the Chargers players?
Depends on the games.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing world domination games and everything, you're like, let's go dominate.
I just, there's a lot of things that it feels like you could do for a while and it'd be fine. I feel like board games with Jim Harbaugh has a lifespan to it before it starts to really grind.
They're not playing with Jim. They're just...
Of course they're playing. You think Jim's just going to I'm going to go take a seat, fellas. Let me know how the game works out. He is front and center. He's the hat with Monopoly. He's in there.
Monopoly's a fun game. Play some Monopoly.
Yeah, but again, 9 hours of it with Harbaugh.
No, they're talking ball, man. They're talking ball. They're getting campfire going at night, telling old football stories. That's happening.
I feel like, maybe a few hours of that, maybe one day.
Are they staying in dorms? Is this like training camp? Or are they in their nice 5-star hotel?
I just think a week of that's going to get grading.
Steelers by 1.5. Where are you going with this one?
Steelers.
I'll take the Chargers. Believing in Harbaugh and the Chargers.
In the board games.
Yeah. I think they're going to also challenge Fields in that passing attack more than ever.
Sure.
Number 2 coverage grade. Cornerbacks have the top coverage grade. I think Chargers defense, I'm believing in them. Harry's taking the Steelers here to cover the 1.5 Sunday at 1. Looking forward to that game. I was going to say you have the cross country. You don't have it.
No, they're there.
The cross country. They're used to the Eastern time zone.
They've been there all week.
Because of the board games.
Because of the board games.
Green Bay Packers at the Tennessee Titans. Titans favored by 1.5 here. Schefter's leaving the door open for a Jordan Love return?
So he's been practicing, and when you watch the clips of it, he's moving around fine. He doesn't look like a guy that's dealing with an injury that's significant enough. He looks better than Kirk Cousins.
This was the high ankle, right?
Yes.
The high ankle is just fascinating because, again, it used to always be 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Mahomes came back within a week, and I know there's different degrees and everything, but he came back within a week. Last year, Trevor Lawrence had it, and I think he came back within by Thursday night.
Right.
It seriously affects mobility and maybe your ability to throw.
So I think
but we've seen more people play within 2 weeks than we've ever had.
I think it became a knee injury. It was the ankle that bent in, but they were questioning whether his knee buckled at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like an MCL sprain, right? Either way, point being, he's out there with like a sleeve on his knee, but he's moving around like he's not injured.
Yeah.
So whilst I think it's still more likely than not that he doesn't play, I think it's definitely a possibility, which means I want to make this the first without pick game.
Without.
Yeah. If
Like
he's
the
not
onions
playing,
on your Philly cheesesteak, we can make wit and without picks.
if Jordan Love is not playing, I favor Tennessee. If Jordan Love is playing, I favor Green Bay, I think.
Now, do you take the adjusted line based off of that too?
So
You
this
have
line to
move the
me
line.
says he's not playing.
Yeah. And I'll take Tennessee with him not playing in this line.
But I think if he does play,
1.5.
I definitely want the Packers.
I'm with you. Over-under is 37.5, by the way. That's low.
Yeah.
It's very low. No, I'm with you. Malik Willis, he had a great answer. They were asking if he, had any ill will toward the Titans for releasing him. He said, no, absolutely not. They gave me a chance. They gave me an opportunity. They drafted me. They paid me every time I was,
Well, that seemed to
on
be the
the
bigger
roster.
point. Yeah, it's like I got a game check every week. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good answer. That was great. I would say if you're Tennessee, like how much does seeing a week of how Green Bay played
How long does that last? Is
with
basically
Malik
the
Willis,
question.
right? They had 200-plus rushing yards in the first half. He barely had to throw the ball, got rid of it quickly.
Yeah.
Will Tennessee be able to take that away?
It's just, what is the lifespan of that offense? That was an incredible performance from Matt LaFleur, from Malik Willis. They created that game plan. They lent into his strengths, and it worked really well. They won the game. How long can you do that before that runs out of effectiveness? Is it 1 week and it's done? Or can you get 2 or 3 weeks out of that kind of game plan before the wheels fall off? That, I think, is the big question. Because, he looked really good, but it does limit what you are limiting yourself in what you ask him to do. It's not a full playbook.
Yeah, I remember I said I was impressed by Tennessee after week 1. I just think they could be pretty decent defensively. They're kind of middle. They have a weird split where they have one of the worst run defense grades in the NFL, but they're kind of middle of the pack in facing the run. Obviously, I think whether Love plays or not, that's going to be huge. Green Bay is going to try to run the ball, either take pressure off Love or just run that similar offense where it runs through the running backs with a little bit of misdirection and Malik Willis in there. I think the Titans are equipped, though, to slow that down with the big boys up front.
Yeah, well, that's again like if Malik Willis is the quarterback, can they have the same success on the ground that they did against Indianapolis? Like they had historic rushing production against the Colts, who couldn't stop anything.
Yeah.
Can they do the same thing against Tennessee, who theoretically should be able to do a better job than that, but haven't necessarily through the first couple of weeks?
And then we got the Levis watch.
Yes.
Is he going to take better care of the ball? And it's not like he's throwing 4 turnover-worthy plays per game. It's just the ones that are coming up are similar, disastrous, avoidable.
And also, what is Callahan's level of patience with that? Like, obviously, the clip went viral of him losing his mind after that latest Will Levis catastrophe. But, like, how many times can you let him do that before you say, you know what? No, enough. You're getting benched for that. Like, that's not acceptable. That if you're going to keep repeating that mistake, that's something we simply can't work with. We're going to sit you down and go in another direction. Admittedly, they don't have a great other direction, so that helps. But, like Mason Rudolph is a viable alternative as like a punishment benching. You know what I mean? Like, it's not you don't look at the depth chart and say, okay, whoever the backup is here is so bad, there's no way we could ever bench him. You look at the backup and you're like, dude, if you don't stop doing this, I'm going to put Mason Rudolph in the game. So, A, can he stop doing it? And B, if he doesn't, how long does Callahan give him before he says enough is enough?
Packers' run defense has been good overall, but I can't get out of my head a few of the big plays they've given up to Jonathan Taylor, to Saquon Barkley. And I think the Titans have this ability with Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard to create big plays. And probably, they want to run the ball more so that Levis doesn't make some of those mistakes. So I don't know. Some of these advantages I feel like go Tennessee's way here.
We're now 2 weeks into this split of Pollard Spears, and it's still heavily favoring Tony Pollard. They need to get Spears involved more.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to see that. Where are you going?
So as I say, I believe
completely based off of the quarterback situation.
It's wit out. If Love plays, I want Green Bay. If he doesn't, I want Tennessee.
I'm going to make the same play. I'll double check with Harry. He's got Green Bay in there, so I'm sure he's up to date on the Jordan Love news.
And I
knows what's
checked,
going
the
on.
sleeper picks lock in at kickoff. So you can actually wait until he's...
What should our rule be here? Are we, because we're telling millions and millions of listeners here on the show what our picks are, but do we have the freedom to go all the way up to the kick with more information between now and Sunday?
I feel, well, I would only do it for, you have to pre-identify it.
We have to announce it.
Yeah. So it has to be like here, where you're saying, look, this is one specific player that is vital to the win or loss of this team.
What
it can't just
about-
be like on Sunday morning, a receiver ends up injured and you're like, it changes everything. I'm swapping my pick.
We're really hamstrung, though, because Sleeper, the app that we're using, is locking in the line on Tuesday.
Yeah, but it's
we're
not-
working off FanDuel's line on Thursday.
But it's not locking in the pick, is my point. So we can wait.
No, but we're still making...
Yeah, so that's
like,
what I'm
what
saying.
if I want to make a different sleeper pick based off the Tuesday line than I want to make here on the show using FanDuel's Thursday line? That's changed.
I think we do exactly what we've been doing. The only change is for instances like this, where the quarterback is a 50-50 to play or not, that you can change up until we know if he's playing.
All right, fair enough. 5 more games to discuss here. So, yeah, what did we say? I'm taking Tennessee.
Green Bay without
Yeah.
Love.
I'm taking
And Harry's
Tennessee
Green
with
Bay.
Willis starting, Green Bay with Jordan Love starting.
You're doing the same.
Chicago Bears at the Indianapolis Colts. Colts favored by 1.5. A couple quarterbacks struggling last week, Anthony Richardson and, of course, Caleb Williams with the Bears. Coming into the season, looked like a fun little schedule for Caleb Williams starting his career, going week 2 against C.J. Stroud, week 3 against Anthony Richardson.
Yep.
What are you looking for in this one?
So the Colts defense is kind of interesting because they, the Gus Bradley scheme, the most cover 3 in the NFL, the sort of most vanilla, the only team really still clinging to that scheme as a base, right? Everyone else has shifted to something different. And now you have this dynamic where Caleb Williams has struggled in protection, let's say. Now, a lot of people will just put that on the offensive line and saying, he doesn't have enough protection. The offensive line is going to get him killed. He's calling the protections, right? And this is the area where defenses, I think, are fighting back the hardest. Everyone is focusing on the too high coverage shells, et cetera, et cetera. But really the biggest thing that's happening is that defenses are attacking protections. And now you have all these young quarterbacks in charge of their protections. That, I think, is where Caleb is struggling the most. The Chicago offensive line individually was beaten several times in that game. They were also giving up a lot of unblocked pressure, and Caleb Williams is in charge of protections. So the Colts this season run a league average stunt rate. They also run a league average blitz rate. Previously, that defense doesn't use those at all, right? It's usually amongst the lowest teams in the NFL at blitz rate and stunt rate. They basically line up for and try and win, and if they don't win, they don't get pressure. They've shown already this season that they're willing to change that for the right matchup. We just saw exactly what happens if you dial up blitzes and stunts. The Bears' offensive line and Caleb Williams running that cannot handle that at the moment.
I was thinking the same thing as I looked into this, right? Because we used to talk about Gus Bradley as just not a game plan specific type of guy, right? He runs what he runs. Even the year where everyone was playing too high against the Chiefs and we're like, oh, look, the magic formula. And he was like, nope.
Right.
Running my cover 1 and my cover 3. And he got torched back in 21. But this year they have been way more aggressive, right? I will say Gus Bradley's blitz schemes are creative. They were rarely used over the last couple of years, but he's using them at a higher rate. And how do you not come out of that game watching the way Houston attacked the Bears' pass protection, both schematically and just from a pure personnel standpoint, and say, we're getting after it. We're going to put pressure on Caleb Williams and cause some confusion.
So playing Caleb Williams incentivizes using those in this game. Also missing DeForest Buckner, who's hurt for the first time in a while, is going to incentivize using that as well. You can't just rely on Buckner winning up front. You've got to start getting creative and use blitzes, use stunts, all that kind of thing. So I do feel like we're going to see, at least as much as Gus Bradley is prepared to do that, them lean on that Houston type of game plan against Caleb Williams, and then he's got to show that after a week of getting his ass kicked by it, he's got better answers.
Raekwon Davis, former second-round pick for the Dolphins, probably the most common or most going to steal most of the snaps from DeForest Buckner. He had a back in 2020, had a decent rookie season for the Dolphins. Hasn't really played, especially against the run, has not played well over these last couple of years. Again, something to just keep an eye on from an injury perspective there. From Indianapolis's point of view, what do you get from Anthony Richardson? Week 1 had that 200-plus yards on 9 completions. Last week, just very inconsistent. We had Mike Renner on yesterday, which we got a lot of great feedback on. Appreciate Renner for joining the show. One of the people that Renner highlighted was one of his favorites in the draft, A.D. Mitchell, and how often he highlighted how often A.D. Mitchell has been open behind the defense and just does not have the production to show for it. Something to keep an eye on there. Like at some point, got to hit those throws. At some point, those throws are going to, come good. They hit one big one last week, Richardson to Mitchell. Mitchell had another drop. There was 2 wide open misses back in week 1. I think he's ready to potentially break out. Josh Downs expects to play. All of a sudden, the Colts look like they're kind of loaded with good receivers. If Richardson can just be a little bit more consistent, a little bit more accurate, they got some big plays they can create there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that to me is the big key is the defense going to stay aggressive against Caleb Williams, and then on the other side it is what type of Anthony Richardson game are you going to get, which I feel like is just going to be a roller coaster week to week. Like he's a wildly inconsistent quarterback right now. So far, 2 weeks we've had the bad version of that, right? What happens if it's just wildly inconsistent and nothing really goes right? That was last week. And then we had the first week where it was, yeah, he missed a lot, but he also hit a couple of absolute freak show plays, and that made up for it, and that's enough to win. We haven't had the other end of the spectrum yet, where what happens when it all comes together for a week, right? Which is still, I think, absolutely in the range of outcomes in any given week. What happens if he has an unusually accurate day and actually hits most of his attempts, and you get the breakout A.D. Mitchell game, and Richardson looks like one of the best quarterbacks in football? That's still out there. We haven't seen that yet.
Back in the dome. Easier in the dome coming off that outdoor game the outdoor road game he's never played.
Right.
So see what happens there. Latu, a little banged up last week. Not sure on the injury report where he stands, but Colts could use him getting going, especially with Buckner hurt. Bears defense has been very good. Pass rush kind of carrying over where they were down the stretch last year, much better than they were early last year. Something to keep an eye on with the Bears defense, keeping them in games, right? They won that first week game against Tennessee. They kept them close against Houston. Bears defense at least going to, maybe buy them some time while Caleb's trying to get comfortable out there. 1.5. Colts are favored here.
Going with the Colts. I feel like their defense is going to have a similar effect on Caleb.
Yeah, I'll also take the Colts here. Like them better at home in the Dome. I think they'll put more points up than they did last week against Green Bay. Harry's going to take Chicago here. Speaking of Harry, we're going to this game. Washington Commanders at the Cincinnati Bengals. Monday night, 8:15, second part of the doubleheader. Bengals are favored by 7.5. I am of the mind that 2 games simultaneously is a good, productive mix. Fewer commercials, you could kind of focus on 2. You can get something out of it. I like the 2-game mix. It's harder when you're in the stadium, as I'll be. I'm just saying from a viewer watching experience, my 2 TV setup, the double game, I think it's good. And one game starts early, you just focus on that. The other game starts later, you just focus on it. It's a good mix. I like the Monday doubleheader. I'm a fan of the Monday doubleheader.
Yeah, I don't know. I have an extra monitor now, so I'm set up to have 3 games, let alone 2 simultaneously. I don't know.
How did you live life without that previously?
I had a second monitor. This is a third one now.
A third. Okay, so I
had the giant TV.
I have 2 TVs.
I have a smaller TV and then a second monitor now.
Okay. So I'm at 2 TVs and 2 monitors. 1 monitor for games, another monitor for stats and info stuff.
Right, and that's not including laptop and blah, blah.
Sure, yeah.
This is a big game for Cincinnati. Like they did snap out of it against Kansas City. Like they showed up, they had a really good game. They could have, should have won it, but they didn't. They came out in the losing end of that. So this is a big game. They're favored heavily. They need to show that was for real, and their slow start was 1 game this year. 1 game and then a second game on the score sheet, on the results board, but not actually in performance terms. If they regress in this game, this is a dangerous trap game for them because their interior defensive line is wrecked from injuries. Washington can run the ball.
Yeah.
There's some danger signs on this one.
It is funny how history repeats itself. Last year, the Bengals started 0-2. including a game, tough loss against the Ravens in week 2. And then week 3, they play Monday Night Football against the Rams and, beat them. And it felt like at the time, nobody knew really how good the Rams were. And it felt like, the Bengals should still be the better team in this Super Bowl rematch. And they beat them just 19-16. Felt like they were getting back on track. Then they lost again. And then they went back to, hey, we're the good Bengals again. But it's the same 0-2 Monday Night Football game that they should win. But they have to take care of business against Washington. And Washington's tough, man. They've moved the ball with Jaden Daniels. Now, they've moved the ball and kicked a lot of field goals, but they've moved the ball offensively these first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, they've been 0-2 in 3 of the last 4 seasons to start the year, but they've never lost the third. They've always either won that game, they had a tie one time, but if they lose again, that's a whole different world. It's much more concerning. Now, following game is against Carolina, so even if they do lose and drop to 0-3.
Andy Dalton revenge game.
Revenge game.
It's
just, this is a game they're supposed to win because they bounce back and show that they're still a good team against Kansas City. But there's some matchup ways that they don't come out of this particularly well. Like Washington, Brian Robinson Jr. has been running the ball extremely well. Jaden Daniels is dynamic, explosive, and dangerous as a ball carrier. This is a dangerous game for Cincinnati.
Yeah, the Commanders are another one of those teams. If you look at the lowest pass rush grades in the NFL using PFF, Panthers are worst, kind of expected, right? They don't have dudes.
Right.
Falcons, kind of expected. Maybe you expect more Grady Jarrett and Matthew Judon, but Rams, maybe a bit of a surprise there. But it's all youth over there. And then the Commanders are 4th worst. And you say, yeah, kind of expected. They have one of the worst edge rush situations. They do have Jonathan Allen up front or Daron Payne, but is that enough? So again, I think Cincinnati's game plan that they unveiled last week, that they're going to throw more tight ends out there, 14 catches to the tight ends, Burrow having time. I thought Burrow dropped his eyes a bunch against the rush. I think he's got to clean that up and not try to scramble through the pocket as often as he does, but I think he'll have more time than he did against Kansas City, and they'll have a chance to pick apart what's been a pretty weak Commander secondary, worst cornerback coverage grades in the NFL so far through 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Jermaine Burton just run a 9.
3 times.
What I would do is more than once this week. Right.
Do it 3 times.
3 times.
150 yards.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The man's averaging 40 yards per reception in his career. Maybe do that more often.
It's the Randy Moss stat line,
I'll know. I'll know when he's out there. I'll be calling it out from the nosebleeds that we're in.
Text me so I can pay attention for that play.
I will. Jermaine's in. Get ready. Here comes the bomb. The one thing that Mike Renner, so just calling out Renner, the only pushback we had from Renner's appearance yesterday was that Commanders fans were saying, we are thrilled with Jaden Daniels through 2 weeks. And Renner was kind of saying, all the QBs are taking too many hits and they look a little overwhelmed. I would say Daniels has been the most impressive of the rookies. I still think there's some polish to the pass game that's needed there, but his running ability has been a difference maker. That was what put them into field goal range against the Giants for the game winner the other day, just his ability to hit the edge with some burst.
Yeah, he's certainly been the best of them so far. I mean, it's a sliding scale, right? How much does it take for you to be thrilled by the potential of your rookie quarterback? But, I don't know that he's looked amazing. But, again, the rushing ability is dynamic, and that is where Cincinnati is vulnerable. So I think this is a potential trap game for them.
All right, man, 7.5. Won't be from the press box because the Bengals denied us.
It's a shame.
But it'll be in the stands.
I am going to go. I think Washington covers this, whether or not they win or not. Whether they actually upset Cincinnati is different, but I think they cover 7.5.
I'll say that as well. Harry's also got one. This is what I'm surprised about. Harry's usually taking the home team and the favorite, and we're going to the game, and it's Cincinnati, but we're all taking Washington here to cover that. 7.5 is a big number.
He's an honest journalist.
He's
not going to
honest.
Allow that kind of bias to impact his pick.
Maybe PJ will let him into the press box.
Maybe.
If he's got the best picks. So we're all taking Washington. Game 2 of the doubleheader Monday night. Denver Broncos at the Tampa Bay Bucks. Sunday, 1 o'clock. The Bucks, 2-0 Bucks, favored by 6.5 here.
Denver's defensive line is pretty banged up now. They got a lot of guys out injured or on the injury report dealing with something. This is the first game now where Baker Mayfield is like clear favorite. You know, you're supposed to win this game. It's a 6.5 point line in your favor. Now can you go out and play
Baker with expectations?
Yeah, now you're expected
without.
to be good. Can you go out and do the same thing as an expected favorite? Can you just
Sam's back on the bandwagon.
Right. Can you just beat the worst team, right? Does he actually play to that level again, or does he need to be the underdog to get the best version of Baker?
Anytime Todd Bowles faces anyone, it's interesting because of the way he attacks with his blitz, and now against Bo Nix, anytime you're facing a rookie in particular, that's going to be a fun matchup to keep an eye on.
I mean, it feels like that's the most effective. Like Todd Bowles' defense, I think, is a little bit hit or miss, and I think there are people that definitely think it's too far on that spectrum of just hyper aggression, hyper blitz the whole time. But if it's going to work against anybody, it's going to work against a rookie quarterback.
Broncos' 9th worst run game in EPA per play. I know they need to get some semblance of, for fear of using the word balance, but just better. They got to take some pressure off Bo Nix, and then he's just got to play. Renner he was a Bo Nix fan. He wasn't too upset with Bo Nix. He thought there were some plays to be made that he's just missed. So maybe there'll be some plays to be made that'll hit this time. But I think Nix has looked a little overwhelmed like some of the other rookies to this point.
Yeah, I mean, he said it himself, right? He just threw the ball to the wrong guy.
There's a lot of clips going around about the play calls. Sean Payton's long verbiage, maybe messing up the timing and everything. But it's like, this isn't the first time. Like, that verbiage has been in the NFL for 30 years. It's not the first time somebody's had to handle a play call, remember it. I mean, Chris Sims, with the funny clip of Sims, that was like day one of training camp. By the season, Sims knew how to call a play, right?
It probably does impact young players, though, like more than, established veterans that know what they're doing. Like, when was the last young player that Sean Payton was throwing this at? He had Drew Brees, obviously, for years, and then when he didn't have Drew Brees, he tended to have some form of veteran backup that, he wasn't throwing a rookie in there to do it.
Yeah, I think Payton got some good out of Kerry Collins.
Right.
Veteran Kerry Collins with the Giants. And then he had a run with the Cowboys, I think. I mean, look, there's a lot of play callers who a lot of their success is tied to the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a factor, and I'm sure it's not helping, but it's also not the thing that's causing what we're seeing so far.
But yeah, Knicks against Todd Bowles. I mean, for the Bucs, just pulling off that last week against the Lions, huge. To have the opportunity to go to 3-0 here. Broncos corners haven't played all that well. I still think Patrick Surtain's one of the league's best. Any matchup with him going up against Mike Evans is going to be fun to watch. Chris Godwin, by the way, absolutely tearing it up, as we've highlighted, leading the league in a couple categories receiving-wise. He's been Baker's go-to guy, and so this offense, just the pass game in particular, looks like it's cooking because Baker's comfortable and the receivers look healthy, and I think it's going to be tough for Denver this weekend.
Yeah, and you might have a one-on-one win with Patrick Surtain against whoever they want to put him on, but they've got 2 or 3 other receivers that can exploit those matchups as well. So it's hard to see how Denver's defense can stop this, other than Baker not playing as well as he's played.
Bucks by 6.5. Where are you going with this one?
Well, I'm officially contractually bound now as part of the Baker Mayfield bandwagon to buy into Baker Mayfield.
He's not going to let you down this week.
No,
right?
Well, he wouldn't do that. Having convinced me to come back on board the Baker train, he has to deliver now at 6.5 point favorite.
I'll take the Bucks to win and cover. Baker Mayfield getting MVP consideration coming out of this game. It's all going to happen. It's all going down. Harry's also taking the Bucks to cover the 6.5 here. New York Giants at the Cleveland Browns. Similar line, 6.5 here. Your 1-1 Cleveland Browns coming off a win against the 0-2 Giants.
So the biggest thing to me for this game is Malik Neighbors has looked great, but the Giants have one target essentially. Like 60, he's getting 2/3 of their targets. That's insane. How does Cleveland defend that? Like, how do they, like last week when we saw what the Bengals were doing, the Chiefs were doing to Jamar Chase, right? He was getting the Bill Belichick treatment of, we're going to bracket cover you every single play, and we're going to make them go somewhere else with the ball. And if guys like Yoshi Vaz can win that rep, great, fair play. But that's what you're going to get made to do. We're not going to let Jamar Chase win this game. I mean, the Cleveland has to do that to Neighbors, right? Like, they have one, make them go anywhere else with the football. If somebody else wins, fine. We're not letting Neighbors catch the ball. He gets 2/3 of their targets. At the minimum, we're going to force them to change what they want to do on offense and adjust and go somewhere else. And that itself has some merit to it.
Brown's still playing a high percentage of man coverage, especially relative to the rest of the league. So you'll get to see some of those one-on-one matchups with Neighbors. When you're playing cover one, you're playing man, you have those extra defenders to deploy. And given the extreme nature that Neighbors was targeted, it might be time for extreme nature and man plus, your lurker, your extra player giving attention to Malik Neighbors. The other side, I think, interesting as well. Deshaun Watson, I thought, played well relative to previous performances, played well on Sunday. Can he back it up? Can he go back-to-back with another good game? They missed David Bell, who's kind of their number 3 target. Cedric Tillman had a few plays out there. He looked like he got behind the defense. Just keep an eye on Tillman. Looks faster than some of the other receivers. Maybe some big plays to be had there for Tillman if he gets some snaps.
We're also going to get a first of good Andrew Thomas. Not a first time they played each other, but the first time they played each other since Andrew Thomas became a good player.
Oh, against Myles Garrett.
Andrew Thomas against Myles Garrett will be a fun one-on-one matchup.
Thomas have the number 1 PFF grade, or at least pass blocking
certainly
grade
over
right
90 right now, yeah. The other thing that'll be interesting is the other side of the ball.
Yeah, number 1 pass blocking grade. Sorry, number 1 pass blocking grade in the NFL, Andrew Thomas against the best pass rusher in Myles Garrett.
Dexter Lawrence watch. Dexter Lawrence is a one-man wrecking crew there. The interior of that Browns offensive line, Joel Bitonio's had one good game, one bad game. Wyatt Teller is a really good player. But Ethan Pocic is a guy that can be, or Posick, how do we say that?
Posick, I think sounds right.
Yeah. Is a guy that can be exploited. Certainly somebody that can't handle Dexter Lawrence one-on-one. What do the Browns have to stop Dexter Lawrence wrecking the game?
So Cleveland by 6.5. I mean, I know Browns fans were excited to win last week. They won 18-13 against the Jags. And as great as good as Watson, as well as Watson played relative to previous expectations, the offense scored 16 points. They had a safety in there as well. Can they cover 6.5 here against the Giants?
I believe the Giants will keep it closer than that. People were so mad, by the way, that we said that was arguably the best game Deshaun Watson had played as a Brown.
I know.
He's had better statistical games, but I'm not sure he played any better than that.
I do hate calling out the outliers, but there are a few delusional Browns fans when it comes to Watson analysis. There's been a few.
I don't think these were that. I think this was just like people looking at a game that say he put up 290 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions, and saying, well, that's clearly better than the performance he had, last week. And
No, there was more rhythm here. I thought he made some more the outside of structure stuff for Watson that's been missing has been the most alarming thing to me. And I tweeted out a stat this week because again, as I watch film, I ask a question and then kind of look it up. But like his PFF passing grade, it's backed up by EPA as well. His PFF passing grade with the Texans outside of structure was like 82 for his entire career. Since he's joined the Browns, it's down to 40. It's just completely different. And you feel that watching the film. You're like, where's the special? And last week, you at least saw more of it. Like you at least saw a few more plays where he was avoiding a sack that should have been a definite sack. He juked Trayvon Walker and made a play. Like he made a few more plays outside of structure. EPA is also a massive difference, right? With the Texans outside the pocket, Deshaun Watson, 0.13. With the Browns, it's been minus 0.37. He's just if you just added those plays back in, not the only plays that you want, but if you just added those plays back in, everything's different. So maybe it's a step in the right direction after last week. He's had like 3 good games with the Browns.
Yeah.
And that was one of them.
Well, that's the thing.
So you can argue which of those 3 games was your favorite, but it's been 3.
We did
last year he had 1, 2022 he had 1, and last week he's had 3 out of about 14.
Yeah, we did say arguably rather than definitively, but that was basically as good as he's played. The important thing is, can he do it again? Because, as you said, it's been few and far between.
That said, did I take the Giants? I initially said Cleveland.
I'm taking the Giants to keep it within 6.5.
I'm going back to Cleveland now. I'll take Cleveland to cover the 6.5. I got to change, maybe update the app, make sure it's all the same. But you're taking the Giants. I'm taking Cleveland. Harry's taking the Giants from what I'm seeing here. Last game of the week, Carolina Panthers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Somebody, let's double check, make sure we didn't miss anything. We get the Titans? Yeah, we did. The Raiders are favored by 5.5. I believe it started at 7 pre-benching of Bryce Young.
And that's just insulting to the Red Rifle. You're telling me...
You think he's worth more than 1.5?
I do. You're telling me that the Red Rifle is only worth 1.5 points relative to Bryce Young against the spread. I think that's disrespectful, and I think the Ginger King is going to show you how disgusting that is as an outcome.
The man in Vegas is telling you that.
The man in Vegas is disrespecting the Ginger King, the Red Rifle, the controller of all of the Ginger talent now, and he's going to show them what a big mistake that is.
Andy Dalton in week 3, we talk about the history repeating itself, got to play week 3 last year.
Yep.
Threw for 360 against Seattle. Listen, I don't believe the Panthers roster around Bryce Young has been great. I think it's probably better now this year versus last year.
And this was last year's offense he did that with.
I'm not saying they've done a wonderful job of building around Bryce Young, but there is a strong contingent. There are some strong takes that just the Panthers have just failed Bryce Young. However, last year when Andy Dalton came in, the offense looked completely different.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, guys are open. All of a sudden, they can pass. Actually, they weren't pass protecting. He was still making plays, if I remember correctly.
This year, they actually do seem to have a pretty solid offensive line.
Yes. The other point I wanted to make, so the other time that this scenario came up was when Zach Wilson was with the Jets, looking horrendous, and then all of a sudden, Mike White came in and goes like 30 for 40, and he's getting rid of the ball quickly and on time. The quarterback can make a bad situation look completely different, right? Maybe not over time, but it was alarming when that happened with Zach Wilson. It was alarming when this happened with Bryce Young last year.
And last year's Browns, Joe Flacco comes in and suddenly, oh, look, this offense is capable of putting up over 300 yards. Like, I genuinely think that Dalton coming in is going to show you a completely different looking Carolina Panthers offense, and we're going to suddenly go, oh, wow, it actually isn't that bad at all. The offensive line last week, nobody on that line gave up more than one pressure, right? It's just that every time there was pressure, Bryce Young made it into a sack. Like, he panicked, made it worse, turned it into a sack. Whereas actually, if Andy Dalton is playing a game with 4 pressures, Andy Dalton's going to cook. Then we get to what these receivers start to look like now that there's somebody who's willing to put the ball, A, in the air, and B, in their general vicinity, right? Like that first play, the first ball to Bryce Young, that was a throw to be made. The second one, the second interception in week 1, was a throw that was there to be made. He just airmailed it 5 yards over the guy. If Dalton is hitting those receivers, we have a completely different take on what these guys are doing and how good they are and what this offense is capable of. I think we're going to have now the defense may still stink, but I think coming out of this game, we're going to be like, actually, Carolina's offense is fine. Bryce Young has been the majority of the problem through 2 weeks this year, regardless of what it was a year ago. But Canales working with this group and Andy Dalton, I think, is actually going to be pretty good.
They have no pass rush for Carolina. I mean, so there are other issues on this team. So I'm kind of like of both minds. You know, I thought Bryce Young being out there in the situation last year hurt him. He could have played, but he also could have played better. There's also a chance he's just never going to figure it out. Maybe he'll figure it out in 3 years like some other guys do. I don't know. I do think this offense will be better with Dalton. All of a sudden, the Raiders, though, with that comeback last week against the Ravens, they've been playing pretty feisty on defense again, so they've at least carried that over, I think, from Antonio Pierce, you know, taking over as head coach this year. And at the very least, again, I don't know what you want from Minshew in a 16-game sample. He almost led the Colts to the playoffs last year, or at least was the QB for the team that almost made it to the playoffs. Minshew can at least get the ball to these playmakers. He can get the ball to Devontae Adams. He can get the ball to Brock Bowers. That's what led the comeback last week. I think we're going to see more and more of that. Throw Jacoby Myers in there, and that's a pretty good trio of pass catchers. This is what I thought the Raiders would be, you know, maybe the last couple years with Devontae Adams when Derek Carr was there, that they'd have the pass catchers to move the ball through the air. It feels like they do now, especially with Bowers emerging with 15 catches in his first 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Raiders' offense has definitely got some some juice. It's got some plays to work with. Now, they can't seem to run the ball. This is the pillow fight thing. Raiders can't run the ball. Carolina can't stop the run. Which one gives in the game?
It's so bad, their run game.
Yeah.
Minus 0.62 EPA per play for the Raiders. If you missed this stat the other day, they lose over a half a point every time they hand it off. That is 3 times worse than the next worst rushing attack in the NFL. Again, stats are fun through 2 weeks because they're at like extreme ends, right? And we know that they're not going to sustain, but it tells a big story about how bad the Raiders' run game is.
Well, if they run the ball 21 times in a game, they've given up a touchdown.
It's one way of putting it.
They're now a touchdown worse off than they were before they started.
And Antonio, like any other old school coach, is like, hey, as long as we run the ball 20 times, we're going to win the game. That's the key. No, we're going to lose 7 points if we do that. Yeah. According to the numbers.
So that's
how you use numbers, Sam.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Good use of data.
Yeah, perfect use of data. That's rather befuddling.
If we never run the ball, we won't lose any points in this game.
Perfect.
That's how you do it. So, all that said, in Vegas, it's 4:05 Sunday, 5.5 points. Will the Raiders cover that?
Mm-hmm. I believe they will not cover that because I believe in the Red Rifle and his revenge against the man in Vegas.
Yeah, so is your ginger theory now? So you're believing in the ginger theory essentially because you're taking Carolina and you're also going against Darnold and the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Andy Dalton can put up 360 with last year's Carolina offense, I believe Andy Dalton is going to come in and make this one look pretty good.
It's so funny.
I also believe that he is the ginger. He is the most ginger and therefore will contain all the ginger theory.
We do all this analysis and all this studying and we're just like, well, Dalton did it last year during week 3. That means a lot. We get the rest of Andy Dalton's career when he's been just, a fine starter. Anyway, I'll take Carolina as well. I think their offense will look much better. Defense will still struggle. I'll take Carolina, though, to keep it close enough. Harry's going to take Vegas here.
Nice.
I'm not sure he knows about the benching, but he's going to keep picking against Carolina. Maybe it'll work for him. All right, man. That's it for us today.
Yeah.
We got Thursday Night Football tonight. We'll be reacting live right after the show. YouTube exclusive. If you're listening, don't forget to subscribe on the YouTube channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, be sure to do that. We could also use some 5-star reviews.
Yes.
Because somebody put a 1-star review in there after like our first couple teaser episodes, and he was mad that we weren't going long form.
Pretty harsh.
That's why he put a 1-star in there. So we're going to need people to balance
It wasn't even like
that out.
His review wasn't even like, you guys are trash, this sucks. It was like, I'm a little on the fence right now. This is slightly different to what I'm used to. Therefore, 1 star.
And we tried to assure everybody, like, give us a 3-star.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's a little knee-jerk. Like,
right?
I'm out completely.
Give us a week. So please go make the podcast 5-star review. It could be through Spotify, through Apple, whatever it is, because it just helps the show.
Yeah, and as we said before, get into the Discord, get signed up to the Pick'em leagues and all those kinds of things. I mentioned that the leader was 3 games clear of the pack. I didn't mention his name previously, so I would like to correct or address the record. Chris Budge apparently is the guy. 23 wins, 3 games clear of anybody else.
Unbelievable.
He's the guy currently leading the Pick'em League in the Sleeper app on the Discord.
Relight Robot says, I'll give you a 5-star review, but only if you call me pretty. You're pretty.
There you go. Done.
There's one. Dixon Cider.
Shout
me out. I'll give you a 5-star on multiple accounts. Dixon Cider. Shout out.
We just spend the last 5 minutes of every show trading shout outs for 5-star reviews.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Cool.
I mean, it's for the show.
It's for the show.
We're just all trying to grow here together. So anyway, appreciate everybody. Hit the thumbs up on the way out. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Monday reviewing all the week 3 action.